this would be the front door, correct?
Yes.
And where's the mailbox? If you can point to it with the laser pointer. Okay, so you're pointing to an area just in front of a car that's in the driveway, correct?
Yes.
And then the driveway's to the right,
Yes.
and then along this line is the front lawn area and property line of 34 Fairview, correct?
Yes.
You indicated that that Jeep was just a little bit in front of the mailbox, meaning about there, correct?
Yes.
And the rear end of that Jeep would be butting up against the driveway,
Yes.
or at least the line of the driveway, correct?
Yes.
That's quite a bit of detail about where that Jeep was. Would you agree?
No, because I drove down the street and I took a left into the driveway and there was a Jeep there.
Okay. What I'm asking is, you didn't just say, your memory was not just somewhere in front of the house. It's literally right in front of the mailbox, the front end of it, adjoining the line of the driveway, correct?
Yes.
That detail obviously stuck out in your mind.
It did, because I was wondering whose Jeep it was.
Did you discuss that detail with your husband at any point?
Not sure.
You're not sure? You might have.
I'm not sure if I said, whose Jeep is that?
No, I don't mean then. I mean between then and now, have you and Mr. Mccabe ever discussed where that Jeep was, or your memories of where that Jeep was?
Possibly.
You're aware that he put the Jeep in the exact same place that you did.
Objection.
Are you aware of that?
I am. Oh, wait, no. Excuse me. Repeat the question?
You're aware that he puts the Jeep in the exact same spot you just put the Jeep, right in front of that mailbox, correct?
I know he knows where the Jeep was. I'm not aware what he said in here.
Does he know where the Jeep was because you told him what to say about the Jeep?
Absolutely not. It's because we drove together in the car and I asked. I possibly could have asked.
One at a time, please, ma'am.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to step on your words. I thought you.
That's okay. You can continue.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I don't think we got your answer, though.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Madam Court Reporter was asking for your answer.
Can you repeat your answer?
To the question of did he know where the Jeep was?
Whether or not you told him where the Jeep was.
I did not need to tell Matt where the Jeep was. He knew because we were in the car together.
But you two discussed it.
When are you asking?
At any time between January 29th and today.
I'm sure we have, yes.
You were also interviewed by Trooper Proctor on January 29th, 2022, correct?
Yes.
And you were asked a series of open-ended questions. What did you see and where did you see it, correct?
Yes.
Nobody put any words in your mouth.
No.
Nobody told you what to say at that time.
No.
And you told Trooper Proctor that when you arrived at the scene, after you got there, you, quote, first observed the vehicle, meaning Miss Reed's SUV, parked on the street by the driveway facing the direction of Chapman. Correct?
Do you have something I can look at to refresh my memory?
Sure. Do you not have a memory of exactly what you told Trooper Proctor?
Well, I know what
Yes or no? You need your memory refreshed?
I would like to see what the report says, please.
Permission? Yes. Thank you. Paragraph 3. This is the face page. You'll review that, especially the highlighted portion. Let me know after you've reviewed it. Just read it to yourself. Did you have that, does that refresh your recollection?
Yes, I know I told.
I'm asking you, I'm so sorry to do this, I don't mean to be rude. I'm just asking you, does that or does that not refresh your recollection?
Regarding?
What you said to Trooper Proctor on the 29th.
Well, I know what I said to Proctor Trooper on the 29th.
Okay. I have to do it this way, it's court rules. Does that help you with your recollection of what you told Trooper Proctor?
I didn't tell I told Trooper Proctor the car was outside when I looked at the front door, it was straight outside.
Okay. I can't quite get the answer I'm looking for. The court is going to require me to ask this question again. Does that refresh your recollection, yes or no, as to what you told Trooper Proctor? Yes.
I did not say this to Trooper Proctor, no.
It doesn't help you.
No.
Okay. May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you. So you did speak to Trooper Proctor on the 29th, correct?
Correct.
All right. And Trooper Proctor asked you some very specific questions about where things were, correct?
Correct.
Focused on Miss Reed's SUV, didn't he? Asked you questions about where Miss Reed's SUV
If you
was.
can show me in the report.
Just read it.
So just off of what I just read, is that what you're going off of? Yes?
I'm asking for your memory. You're testifying.
Yes, so my memory is exactly where the car was.
Hold on. So it's very important that both of you, one person at a time, speaks.
Okay.
Madam Court Reporter has to do what you're both saying, and she can't do it simultaneously. So the best way to do that is, Ms. Mccabe, just let counsel ask the question
Okay.
and then you answer. And if it takes a lot more time than we expect it to take, it does. Okay, so just
Thanks.
go ahead, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Robert. I'll slow it down. Did you talk to Trooper Proctor about where the SUV was?
Yes.
Thank you. And he asked you questions about where it was situated outside, correct?
Yes.
And you told him that you first observed it parked on the street by the driveway facing the direction of Chapman, correct?
I told him that when I looked out the front door, the car was straight ahead. And yes, it was facing up Chapman.
And you left out a little part by the driveway, correct?
That could have been his interpretation or an error on his part.
I see. So Trooper Proctor is wrong about what you said.
Objection.
No, I'll let him have it. Do you think he's wrong about what you said?
I 100% said it was straight out the front door.
Okay, next question, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. And during the course of that conversation, you never once, Ms. Mccabe, not once, mentioned a several-ton Jeep with a snowplow attached to it, did you?
I'm not sure if I did or not.
Let's take another look at the report. Would that refresh your recollection to see the report?
Objection.
Do you think that will help you?
I'll take a look at it.
Okay.
May I?
Yes.
Direct your attention once again to paragraph 3. You've had an opportunity to review
I have, yeah.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
That looks like a report from Trooper Proctor of your interview, correct?
Correct.
That interview was taken on January 29th, correct?
Correct.
That interview was taken just a few hours, not days or weeks, hours after the events in question, correct?
Correct.
And you were asked what you saw, what you observed in front of 34 Fairview on that morning, correct? I'm sorry, the night before, correct?
He asked specific questions about Miss Reed's vehicle.
Okay. And when you said where you remember Miss Reed's vehicle being, you placed it in the exact spot where you're now saying there was a Jeep with a snowplow on it, correct?
Incorrect. I never placed Miss Reed's car in the spot where Mr. Higgins' vehicle was.
So as Trooper Proctor was taking notes about what you were saying, he just got it wrong.
You'd have to ask Trooper Proctor.
I will. And you never mentioned, according to that report, not one word about a Jeep, right?
I may never have been asked about a Jeep.
So if you weren't asked about a Jeep, you also weren't asked about a Nissan Altima. You mentioned that?
No.
Right. Because what he asked you was, what did you observe in front of the house? Ma'am, that's what he asked you, wasn't it?
No.
And you said, I observed her car by the mailbox.
No.
And you never mentioned the Jeep, did you?
You are not portraying what the conversation was.
Did you or did you not mention a Jeep sitting on that, right by that driveway to Trooper Proctor? Yes or no?
It's not in the report. I don't recall if he asked me about a Jeep.
Now, following the events of January 28th, 29th, you spoke extensively to Chris and Julie Albert, correct?
What do you mean by extensively?
Did you speak at all?
Yes, we did.
Between then and now, to Chris and Julie Albert.
Do I speak to Chris and Julie Albert
Have you spoken to them about these events between then and now?
about this case? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, Ms. Mccabe, I'm asking about this case.
Of course, I speak to them all the time about the vicious harassment we are all receiving.
Okay. That wasn't my question. My question was, did you talk to them about this case, Ms. McCabe?
Yes.
I realize you want to give additional answers and editorialize. I'm asking you very specific questions.
Objection.
So objection as to the form. We've talked about this at sidebar, Mr. Jackson.
You've talked to them about the details of that night, correct? The 28th going into the morning of the 29th.
Yes.
You've talked to them about what happened at the bar, correct?
We've spoke about how we were all at the bar and Karen and John came in.
Is that yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. You've spoken to them about your memory of what happened at the house at 34 Fairview that night, correct?
Yes.
You've spoken to them about who was at the bar, not just what happened, but who was there, correct?
Correct.
You talked to them about the timing of the night, correct?
I don't think specifically, no.
When people came to the bar, when they left, when people got to Fairview, when they left Fairview, things of that nature.
Well, they were at the bar, so they know who was there and when they left.
Can ask if you know what they know. I'm asking if you've ever spoken to them about these issues. Yes or no?
I can't be sure if we've spoken about the timeline.
And you've talked to them about when they got there and when they left.
I have no idea when they arrived at the waterfall.
Once again, Ms. McCabe, that's not what my question was. Do you understand my question? Have you spoken to them about their memory of that night and when they came and left?
They have not shared with me when they got there or when they left.
In the 2 years or 2.5 years since this event, you've had extensive conversations with your friends and family about this circumstance, correct?
Correct. Yes.
You've told them your observations, your story, correct?
Correct.
Your observations of the night,
Correct.
and they've told you their observations of the night, correct?
Correct.
So y'all have compared and contrasted your perspectives of what happened that night, correct?
We've tried to figure out what happened to John, our friend.
And you've talked to them extensively about your observations and what your story or your version is. Is that right?
To be honest, not extensively. Speaking about it is very painful and difficult.
What does extensively mean? More than twice?
Well, you tell me.
I'm asking the questions, Ms. McCabe. That's how this works.
I understand, but extensively would mean almost every day.
Do you talk to them almost every day?
I do, but not about the case.
Subjects about this case come up every day?
The harassment of the case does, yes.
What about the specific facts of the case? Ms.
No,
McCabe?
it's the facts aren't spoken as much as the vicious harassment is spoken about.
Understood. So you've told them your version of the events, correct? And they've told you their version of the events.
Correct.
And remind me, Chris and Julie Albert are, in fact, Colleen's parents.
Correct.
At some point, you became aware that your daughter, Allie, was involved in this matter to some extent, correct?
Yes.
You became aware that there was an extraction of your phone that revealed some data about her whereabouts.
That's not how I became aware now.
Like 360?
Yes, I know what that is.
Okay, that's what I'm asking about. You became aware that you know your phone was extracted, correct?
I willingly handed over my phone.
Oh, we'll get to that.
Oh, okay.
You know that your phone was extracted.
Yes, I handed it over.
And you know that your daughter's whereabouts were revealed based on data on that phone, correct?
That is not how I became aware of my daughter's whereabouts.
You testified at the state grand jury, questioned by Mr. Lally, correct?
Yes.
You were asked about the Life 360.
Yes.
You answered those questions very fluidly.
Yes.
Yes, I know what Life 360 is. I use it all the time. It's an app, etc.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go over that for a second. You admitted that it works as a, quote, GPS as far as where people go and everywhere that you go, correct?
Correct.
You indicated that it works as a reliable, quote, unquote, tracking device, is your testimony.
Correct.
You indicated that you rely on it, quote, so you know where your kids are at all times. Is that right?
Correct.
And you even said that it's a, quote, unquote, good parenting tool. Is that right?
Correct.
And the reason you said that is because it's accurate in your experience and it's reliable. Is that right?
It's a good tool, but it is not always accurate.
But you said, when you testified in front of the great grand jury, that it's accurate and it works as a GPS as far as where you go and everywhere you go, correct?
Objection.
Did you say that?
Can I see it?
Sure. May I approach you on it?
Yes.
Lines 13 through 15.
You said 13 through 15?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Does that refresh your recollection?
It does, yes.
Question and answer?
Well, I just don't see the word accurate on there. I don't know if I missed it.
Ms. Mccabe, does that refresh your recollection as to the question and answer about whether you said it works as sort of a GPS as far as where you go and everywhere that you go?
Correct.
And your answer was, yeah. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So where did Allie go after she supposedly dropped off Colin Albert?
She went nowhere.
Did you check her Life 360 app to verify that she went, quote, nowhere?
At that point, I had no reason to check her.
So the answer is no, you didn't.
No.
Okay. Did you ever verify through the Life 360 app that in fact Allie did not go home, but rather was out driving until after 1:30 a.m.? Did you ever check the app and see that?
Did I ever check Life 360 app for that?
Yep.
No.
Okay. But you believed her when she said she came home.
Yes.
And just like you believed her when she said she picked up Colin, dropped him off, and then came home.
Yes.
Okay. The Alberts had a dog, pardon me, correct?
Yes.
What was the dog's name?
Chloe.
You indicated that on the morning of January 29th, after 6 a.m., it was still relatively dark out, you burst into the bedroom of Brian and Nicole Albert's home, correct?
Yes.
You did that specifically to wake up, according to you, Brian Albert and Nicole Albert, correct?
Yes.
Where was Chloe?
I don't know.
So you'll agree that, at least from their perspective, you walked in the front door unexpectedly, correct?
Yes.
You walked upstairs unexpectedly, correct?
Yes.
Still dark outside, right?
Yes.
You walked through their door, and you said you burst into the door into a dark room where they were sleeping, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Albert said that you were somewhat hysterical. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
You were loud, right?
I was trying to wake them up.
You were somewhat chaotic.
Yes.
And you don't remember a 70-pound German Shepherd having any reaction.
No.
Matter of fact, you don't remember the dog being there at all, correct?
Correct.
You never saw that dog, correct?
I have no memory of seeing that dog.
Okay, so as you sit here today,
Mhm.
you cannot say that the dog was here because you don't have a memory of ever seeing it.
I did not see it, no.
And remind me once again, when you were leaving that night, that early morning before,
Mhm.
who was the last person to leave? Was it Caitlin?
I believe she left after us.
We've talked about this, and I want to get into a little bit more detail about it. You indicated that at some point you looked outside and you saw Karen Reed's SUV in front of the house. Safe to say, correct?
Correct.
About what time was that you first saw it?
I can just give you maybe approximates. I know I texted when I saw them, so whatever time that was.
All right, let's see if we can narrow that down just a little bit. You also indicated that you saw Ryan Nagel's vehicle outside.
Saw lights.
Okay. Lights belonging to the vehicle, right?
Yes, I knew there was another vehicle outside.
And where was that in relation to Miss Reed's vehicle?
It was behind it. I didn't pay much attention to it.
Okay. And where was the Jeep in relation to Ryan Nagel's vehicle and Karen Reed's SUV?
I remember seeing Karen Reed's SUV straight, and then I saw the lights of Ryan Nagel. I did not pay attention to where it was. I was just looking at Miss Reed's vehicle.
Was Ryan Nagel's vehicle and those lights that you remember, were they in front of the Jeep or behind the Jeep?
I am not certain.
Haven't you testified previously that you remember the Jeep being between Ryan Nagel's vehicle and the SUV?
I am not certain where Ryan Nagel's vehicle was.
So as you sit here now, you don't know if it was in front of the Jeep as you placed it by the mailbox.
It would
Let me
be,
finish my question. Behind the Jeep or somewhere in between?
it definitely was not in front of the Jeep.
Definitely was not in front of the Jeep.
No.
So it was definitely behind the Jeep.
Behind or to the side, I'm not sure.
Well, if it's parked on the street in front of the house, it's not going to be beside the Jeep, right? That's going to be in the middle of the
It
road.
would have been in the middle of the road, correct. So if it's pulled over, it's behind the Jeep.
Okay, so now we've narrowed that down. It's Karen Reed's SUV. As we're looking at the property, Karen Reed's SUV. To the right of that, as we're looking at from the street, at the property, to the right of that Jeep, behind that Ryan Nagel's vehicle, correct?
Correct.
You sure about that?
If my memory serves right, yes.
If your memory serves you. Okay. So, you were asked about the arrival of Mr. Nagel's car at the state grand jury. Do you recall that?
I believe so.
That was in April 26th, 2022.
Mhm.
Just
Okay.
if you remember. Okay. Does that sound about right? I
Yep.
don't expect you to
Yes.
revise that date.
Yes.
You were asked what time did you see Ryan Nagel's vehicle arrive at the location, and you indicated that it was 12:23. You remember that?
Do you have it?
I do. Yeah.
Yes.
lines 21 down the highlighted portion. Let me know when you're
Okay.
May I interrupt?
Yes.
You were asked, do we know what time the brother came? Meaning Ryan Nagel.
Okay. Correct.
And the question from Mr. Lally was, that was from a grand juror, the question from Mr. Lally was, if you know, correct?
Correct.
And your answer was, I believe he was out front at 12:23. Is that right?
Correct.
And the reason you could be so precise with that time, Ms. McCabe, is because you had asked Julie Nagel to give you her text messages with Ryan for that night, and you had refreshed your recollection about the time, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you've also testified that as soon as you saw Ms. Reed's SUV, you texted John. Is that right?
Correct.
Here, exclamation point, question mark. That was the first text, right?
Correct.
But your text to John was at 12:27. You recall that?
Yes.
That's 4 minutes after you know Ryan Nagel arrived at the scene, correct?
Correct.
Since Karen Reed arrived before Ryan Nagel, she and John had to have been there 4 to 5 minutes before you ever saw her SUV, correct?
Objection.
Isn't that right?
Ryan Nagel texted his sister at 12:23 here. And then he texted again that he was going to leave. Then Julie Nagel went outside
Ms.
and
McCabe, that's not my question.
I'm explaining what happened in the 4 minutes.
You can explain at another question. My question is very specific. Given the fact that Karen Reed, by definition, arrived at the location before Ryan Nagel, and Ryan Nagel arrived at 12:23, that means, and you didn't notice the SUV until 12:27, that means her car was there for at least 4 minutes before you ever noticed it, correct?
Objection.
Is that correct? Can you answer that question?
Correct.
The snow condition. We've heard a lot about the snow condition. I'm not going to beat that dead horse. But it's safe to say that you would agree with me that it was a light dusting of snow, correct? I should be specific about the time. It was a light dusting of snow at or around 12 to 12:30, 12:45, something like that.
It was starting to accumulate.
Okay. And accumulate means stick to the ground, not just fall and melt, right?
Yes.
So it was starting to turn like a very thin blanket of white.
Yes.
You indicate that, or you indicated on Friday that you saw some sort of tire tracks. Is that right?
On Friday? I don't believe.
I thought in your testimony to Mr. Lally on Friday, you indicated that you saw some tire tracks. I could be wrong.
Yes, I don't remember that.
Okay, well, let me ask you, did you see any tire tracks?
At one point, yes.
Okay, when was that point?
I'm not sure.
Was it before Ms. Reed's vehicle got there? Was it after? Let's use that as a barometer first.
I believe it was after Miss Reed's vehicle was there because that's why I was drawn to look outside.
And what did those tire tracks look like? How would you describe them?
Almost like as a wave went like this. So
Like a half J?
to my recollection, it was almost like started if Miss Reed's vehicle's here, let's pretend, it was kind of like that. Like a bit of a wave. So if you started on coming towards her, it'd be more of a wave,
Okay.
like this in the road.
What it sounds like is perhaps, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but perhaps what you're describing is tracks in the middle of the road. If someone is pulling off parallel, they would pull to the right and then stop and Those are the tracks that you saw? That's the wave that you saw?
It wasn't up to her car. It doesn't look like your description.
Okay, fair enough. I'm just trying here. So if it didn't go up to her car, those tracks belong to somebody else.
Well, when I saw her car, it had already moved up.
Well, wait a minute. You already said that when you saw her car, it was directly in front of you.
And then it moved at one point.
Right, that's not what I'm asking about. Let's just take the point at which you first saw the car.
Mm-hmm.
Is that yes?
Yes.
Okay. When you first saw the car, that's when you saw the tire tracks. You just said that.
No, I did not say when I first saw the car, I saw the tire tracks.
I thought you just said a couple of questions ago that you saw the tire tracks because your attention was drawn to her car. That would be the first time you saw her car, correct?
I'm saying I saw the tire tracks because I was looking out at her car. I never said when I saw the tire tracks or where her car was when I saw the tire tracks.
Well, I thought you just said, as I asked, when did you see the tire tracks? You said, I saw the tire tracks, but I looked and saw her car because my attention was drawn to her car. I saw the tire tracks. That would be the first time you looked at her car, correct?
Doesn't have to be the first time I looked at her car. I looked out multiple times.
Did you see the tire tracks the second time?
Well, I'm not exactly sure.
Did you see them the third time?
Again, I'm not sure.
Okay. So it could have been the first time.
Could have been.
But they didn't lead to the back tires of her car, did they?
No.
Let me have just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
In addition to Trooper Proctor interviewing you on the 29th, you also gave extensive testimony on April 26th, 2022 in front of a state court grand jury, correct?
Correct.
And you were asked about the location of Miss Reed's vehicle. I'm still staying with that for just a quick second, if you don't mind. Is that right?
Correct.
You were asked where that SUV was in relation to Ryan Nagel's car. Is that right?
Would I be able to look at it to refresh my memory, please?
Well, let's start with this. Do you remember being asked about Karen Reed's SUV and Ryan Nagel's truck?
To be honest, I've had a few grand juries, so if you could show me what you're talking about, I would greatly appreciate it.
Let me have just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
May I approach, please?
Yes.
Try to speed things up, Your Honor, if I may have just a moment.
Okay, take your time.
The entire grand jury, direct your attention to 182 to 187. May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the entirety of your state court grand jury.
Okay.
I'm going to direct your attention to pages 182 to 187. You can probably scan those pretty quickly and just let me know after you scan those.
Okay.
Those pages, I should say. May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Did you have an opportunity to glance at those pages?
I did, yes.
As you glance at those pages, my question is a relatively simple one. I wondered if you have an opportunity. At no point, when you were describing the vehicles that were out front, in front of 34 Fairview on that night, at no point, under oath, in front of that grand jury, did you ever mention a Jeep? Did you?
I was not asked about any other vehicles out front.
So when you were talking about the vehicles that you saw in front in some painstaking detail, talking about the black SUV and Ryan Nagel's truck, you just left out the Jeep because nobody asked you about it.
I didn't read anything in that about Ryan Nagel's vehicle.
Did you miss it?
I must have.
Okay.
Is it in there?
Yeah, it is.
Okay,
You were,
what,
in fact, asked about Ryan Nagel's Jeep, weren't you?
if you want to show me.
Well, I don't want to sit here and, did you
I-
review your
I
transcript?
just read it all. I didn't see it.
Ms. Mccabe, you
Objection.
can't interrupt when I'm talking.
Okay.
I will do the same for you. Okay? As you reviewed those pages, you were asked about the cars that you saw in front, did you not?
I was asked about Miss Reed's vehicle.
Okay. And at no point did you mention a Jeep being behind Ms. Reed's vehicle, as you testified today, correct?
The questions were all about Miss Reed's vehicle.
At no point, my question is this, it's yes or no. You did or you didn't. Did you mention ever in that grand jury that there was a Jeep behind Ms. Reed's vehicle? Yes or no?
I'm not sure. I'd have to read it all.
As you sit here, do you recall mentioning the Jeep?
I was asked about Miss Reed's vehicle, and those are the questions I answered.
I can't, you need to keep your
Okay.
voice up, please.
Sorry.
Let's try this again. As you sit here, do you recall mentioning the Jeep, ma'am?
I would have to reread the transcript.
You don't have to reread the transcript to answer that question. Do you recall mentioning the Jeep? If you don't, you don't.
I may not have been asked about the Jeep, so I did not mention the Jeep.
Fair enough. Did you, Mr. Higgins, between then and now, between the date of the incident and now, have you ever had a conversation with Mr. Higgins about where his Jeep was parked?
No.
Have you ever had a conversation with Mr. Higgins about anything having to do with this case?
I do not believe so.
Did anyone, leaving Mr. Higgins aside, did anyone tell you anything about Mr. Higgins' Jeep and what he testified to?
No.
Were you ever asked by anybody to mention a Jeep being behind Ms. Reed's SUV in this trial?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Were you ever asked by anybody to make sure you mention a Jeep being parked behind Ms. Reed's SUV in this trial?
Not that I recall, no.
After you arrived and you noticed this SUV outside, you started paying somewhat close attention to it, did you not?
I went to the front door and looked out the window at the vehicle, yes.
As a matter of fact, you texted as soon as you saw the vehicle, that 12:27 here, correct?
Correct.
And then a few minutes later, at 12:31, you texted, "Pull behind me," to John. Is that right?
Correct.
And then at 12:40, you texted, "Hello," correct?
Correct.
And at 12:42, you texted, "Where are you?"
Correct.
And at 12:45, you texted, "Hello," correct?
Correct.
So that's 5 text messages, and each time you texted him, you were walking to the door and looking out at the vehicle as you're texting, correct?
I know for the first 2 I was.
You testified at another hearing, another proceeding, on June 8th, 2023, correct?
Correct.
In that other proceeding, did you testify that you got up and sat down and got up and sat down every time you were texting?
Possibly.
Okay. So if you got up and walked over to the door and you see the SUV and you text, and then you walk away from the door and sit down for a second, that would be one text and one view of the SUV, correct?
Yes.
So if you did that at 12:27, 12:31, 12:40, 12:42, and 12:45, you'd agree that's 5 times that you were up and down looking at the SUV, correct?
I'm not sure if I did it 5 times.
How many times do you think you did do it?
I know I definitely did it the first when I said here. I know I definitely did it when I said pull behind me, because that's when the vehicle had moved up a little bit.
And then did you see the vehicle move up again? A second time?
Yes, that's when I told him to pull behind me.
Okay, so that's the first time. So just so we're clear, when you first saw the SUV, it was stationary, correct?
When I first saw the vehicle, it was straight ahead out the front door, stationary.
And you texted here.
Correct.
Then you walked back over to the window, or, I'm sorry, to the door, to the storm door, and you said, pull behind me, correct, at 12:31.
Correct.
All right, at that point, you saw that it had moved up a little bit, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so if you saw it move up a second time, which you just said you did, then that would be a third time that you had to have seen it and texted, correct?
Why would that be third time?
Because it only moved once so far. You saw it move twice.
So the first time I saw it, it was here. And I said here. And then the next time I texted, I said, pull behind me. So that was 1 time, 2 times.
Keep going. You said you saw it pull up again, a second time. You said you saw it move twice.
From one place to the flagpole to further up.
Right, so that's 3 times that you're up to the door.
Okay.
Is that yes?
I'm telling you, my memory is twice to the door.
Mr. Cade, it's not a trick question. You just testified that you saw the car move twice. By definition, that has to be you looked at it 3 times. Stationary, move once, move twice.
Maybe I used the wrong wording.
Maybe. Let me have just a moment, Your Honor.
Sure.
So, when you testified in front of this other proceeding, didn't you testify that you walked up and sat back down 5 different times, watching that car and texting every single time?
Would you be able to show me that?
It's going to take a minute. May I have one, Your Honor? Thank you. May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
take a look at those 4 pages. For the record, that's pages 780 to 784.
Okay.
Bait stand. After you've had a chance to review that, just look up and let me know. Yeah.
Yes.
You had an opportunity, Ms. Mccabe, to review those few pages from your testimony in June of 2023.
Yes.
Did you talk about, you were asked about getting up and sitting down and looking at the SUV several different times and texting?
Yes.
In fact, you indicated that you got up and looked outside through that storm door several times, correct?
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, you looked every single time that you texted, you indicated that you looked out at the SUV and saw something that prompted you to text something, correct?
Correct.
And then after the last time, which would be 5 times, 5 texts, 5 looks, after the last time you texted, you got back up, which would be a 6th time, and the SUV was gone. Just chronologically.
Correct. My husband and I were both getting up and looking, so.
I didn't ask you about your husband.
Okay.
Just about you. The answer is correct.
Yes.
Okay. So you're indicating that you were trying to communicate with the occupant of the SUV that was sitting, what would you say, 30 feet outside the front door?
I'm not good with distance.
It's further than you and I are from each other, correct?
Correct.
At least double that, right?
Correct.
Okay, so could you give me, maybe yards are easier, like 10 yards, 15 yards?
Again, I'm not good with measurements.
Okay. Just right outside the front door, though. Within,
Straight outside, yes.
well, straight outside until it moved.
To the front door. Of the front door is where it was.
Ms. Mccabe, straight outside until it moved, according to you, correct?
Yes, and then it moved. Correct.
And then moved the second time, correct?
Correct. It moved to the flagpole, and then it moved up again.
Okay. Then you indicated that you had an absolutely clear view of the SUV. You were asked those questions, correct?
If I had a clear view,
Clear view.
I could see the car out front. Yes.
You were asked, you were looking out the front door of the house. Your answer was, uh-huh. You were asked, and there's a window in that door, right? Answer, it was opened. Yeah. Question, so you had a clear view outside. Answer, a clear view outside. Yes. Remember that?
Yes,
Okay. And is that your memory? You had a clear view?
I had a clear view of Karen's vehicle outside, correct?
And then you reiterated that with the following exchange. Question, was the amount of snow coming
Objection,
down
Your Honor.
sufficient?
So let's hear the question.
Was the amount of snow coming down sufficient to obstruct your view of the vehicle, or did you have a clear view of it? Answer, I had a good view of it.
The objection is as to the form of the question and the reading.
Oh, that's okay. I'm going around the question.
Was that your testimony?
Yes,
So not only did you have a clear view, you indicated in your words you had a good view of it, right?
correct.
Then you noticed that the SUV was gone after the 12:45 text, right?
Correct.
So you're looking at that SUV over the course of between the beginning text and the end text. It's about 19 minutes, right? 12:27 or so to 12:45, 18, 19 minutes, something like that, correct?
Correct.
You maybe add a minute because you got back up and didn't text, the SUV was gone, right?
Correct.
So you would agree, we just do some basic math, you're looking at that SUV on average about every 3.5 minutes.
I guess I'm, if you want to pull out the times and you can look at them.
Well, we talked about the times and you agreed that you were texting between 12:27 and 12:45,
Correct.
right? So if you were just to divide that by 5 times, getting up and looking, I don't know, I'm doing the math in my head, maybe it's every 3 minutes or so.
Correct.
At no time did you hear any noise or sound outside that was unusual? Caught your
No.
attention? You didn't hear any squealing of tires or squealing of brakes?
No.
You didn't hear any screaming or yelling?
No.
You didn't hear any loud voices or foul language or door slam?
No.
You didn't hear any verbal argument or the revving of an engine, anything like that?
No.
As a matter of fact, you didn't hear any collision or crash, did you?
No.
As a matter of fact, the entire time that you looked out at that vehicle with that clear and that good view, you didn't see anything out of the ordinary, did you?
No.
And you would agree with me, as you looked at the SUV, you're looking over the lawn to the SUV out at the street, correct?
Correct.
There was no obstruction between you and the SUV. You've already testified to that, is that right?
Correct.
And you could see everything in your field of view.
Correct.
And then you saw the SUV gone. It had driven away after 12:45.
Correct.
So I have a question, Ms. Mccabe.
Mm-hmm.
Where was the body?
I have no idea. I'm assuming the body was on the front lawn.
The problem with that is you were looking at the front lawn, weren't you?
I was looking at the vehicle and where it had moved.
You know what the field of view is?
Would you like to explain it?
You had a clear and good view across that lawn to the SUV, didn't you?
When it was straight out, I did, yes.
You had a clear and good view of that SUV the entire time until it left, didn't you?
I could see the black SUV, correct.
Nothing was obstructing your vision.
I wasn't looking at the ground.
I didn't ask you about the ground yet. We'll get to the ground. Nothing was obstructing your vision, was it?
No.
So you had a clear and good, your words, not mine, a clear and good view of the SUV
Yes.
and everything in front of it.
I never said everything in front of it. I saw the SUV. It's black. It has lights on. And as it moved, I could see it with its lights.
And you had a clear view of everything between you and the SUV. All the things closer to you and the SUV.
I wouldn't say that.
So your view was obstructed on what was between you and the SUV, but not obstructed on the SUV?
That's not what I was saying.
No, of course not. Because if you had a clear field of view to the SUV, you could see everything in front of it as well, meaning between you and the SUV as well.
If I'm looking straight out at an SUV, I'm not looking down at the ground.
Let me ask you a question about that. You're focusing right now on my face
Yes.
as you're answering these questions. You think you'd see, I don't know, an alligator sitting in front of me if it was there?
Objection, Your Honor.
You think you would see something? Can you clearly see that there is nothing between you and me except a podium?
Yes. Well, there's a table.
And you don't have to look down to see that, right?
Correct.
You're looking directly in my face, but you can see things that are between you and me because you have a field of vision, right?
Objection.
So I'm going to see counsel at sidebar for just a minute.
May I proceed?
Yes.
Ms. Mccabe, as you looked over that flat lawn with that good and clear view of the SUV, you could see the SUV and everything between you and the SUV, correct?
When I looked out the front window, I could see the SUV clearly, like I'm looking at you, well, right now, and it was further away than you are.
And you did it not once, not twice, not 3 times. You did it 5 times and then a 6th after it was gone, correct?
Correct.
And after that SUV was gone, and you looked out that window with that clear and good view, there was no body, was there?
I never saw a body.
Thank you.
I wish I had.
Sounds like that's a little rehearsed.
Not at all. It's not at all.
I'll let the answer stand.
You left the location about 1:45. Is that right?
Yes.
You didn't see anything out of the ordinary as you got in. Was it your car or Mr. McCabe's car?
It was my car.
When you got in that SUV of yours, you didn't see anything out of the ordinary outside, correct?
I wasn't looking outside.
Okay. I know that that is the answer that you want to give to every question. My question is yes or no. Did you see anything out of the ordinary?
No.
Thank you. You didn't see anything out of the ordinary when you got in the vehicle?
No.
You didn't see anything out of the ordinary when the vehicle backed up?
No.
When that vehicle turned to the, I guess it would be to the right, to leave toward Chapman, and the headlights illuminated the area in front of you? Didn't see anything out of the ordinary then?
I wasn't looking out the front window.
Again, there's that question. There's that answer. My question is, did you see anything out of the ordinary?
Well, you were asking about the headlights out the front. That's why I said I didn't see anything out there front.
Oh, you didn't see the headlights turned on?
I was turned to the back.
Right. Did you see that the headlights came on in the car?
Yes, in the driveway, the headlights came on.
Right. And you're seated in the front passenger seat, correct?
Correct.
So according to you, you got in the car and immediately twisted yourself, looking directly to the rear and never turned back around and never looked outside the windows.
Correct.
Got it. Is that normal for you?
Yeah, I'm a very chatty person, so I turned to talk to the girls.
So you made sure that you didn't look out the window.
Nope, that's not it at all.
You also didn't hear anybody, you did hear some of the girls in the back, since they were so chatty, talking about bread and sandwiches or something, right?
Correct.
But you never heard anybody say anything about noticing anything out of the ordinary, correct?
Correct.
You didn't hear Julie Nagel say that she saw a black object in the yard.
Never heard that.
But you were turned around looking right out, according to you, correct?
Correct.
Indeed, engaging them in conversation, according to you,
Correct.
so that you could make sure that you weren't looking out the front or right windows.
Objection.
Can you answer that? Is that why you did it?
No, that's not why I did it. I was talking to the two girls.
When you got home, what did you do?
I went up to bed.
What time do you think you got home?
Somewhere after approximately, between 2 and 2:15.
It took you a few minutes to drop the girls off?
Correct.
When you got home, you got on your phone, correct?
Yes.
Before you got on your phone, you went upstairs to your bedroom.
Yes.
Did you use any applications? Well, let me ask it this way first. Did you make any phone calls just using your phone? Any phone calls after you got home, either downstairs or upstairs?
I do not believe so.
Did you use any applications to communicate with anybody through Wi-Fi? Do you know what I mean by that? Like FaceTime audio or WhatsApp, phone calls, things like that?
Text message?
No, actually, and you may not use these, but I'm asking, did you use any kind of third-party app that uses Wi-Fi, VoIP calls, other than just a phone call?
No.
Okay. Sounds like you don't even know what that is.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Fair enough. So it's safe to say that you didn't use or you don't use any multimedia to communicate. You don't use FaceTime or Snapchat or Signal or anything like that.
I've used FaceTime with my children, yes.
Not for phone calls.
No.
Like FaceTime audio is a way that you can make a call. No?
I've FaceTimed with my kids at school, but,
That's videos. Right?
oh, okay, so yeah, I guess not.
You didn't do that night either.
Not that I recall.
Did you? Now I'm going to get back to your question. Did you text anybody?
I did, yes.
Who did you text?
I texted my sisters, and I texted my husband and a friend in a group chat.
You texted your husband and a friend in a group chat?
Mhm.
Is that yes?
Yes,
Your husband was home?
yes.
Okay. I want to switch gears for a second. And ask you real quick about later that morning when you went to John O'Keefe's house. You mentioned on Friday that you went into his house and began to look around for him when you first got there with Carrie Roberts and my client Karen Reed, correct?
Yes,
You indicated that you looked in his bedroom and saw that the bed was made, correct?
yes,
You indicated that you looked around other parts of the house looking for him, searching for him, is that right?
yes,
You obviously saw the blankets and pillows on the couch downstairs in the living room, correct?
I peeked over at the couch.
And you're aware that Karen Reed stayed on the couch that night to wait for John to come home.
I'm not aware of that, no.
You testified on Friday that my client said at the scene, when you got back to the scene, 34 Fairview, just after 6 a.m., that she said, I hit him 3 times. She declared it, correct?
Correct.
Not once, not twice, 3 times. I hit him, I hit him, correct?
Correct.
You have a very specific memory of that event, do you not?
I do.
Obviously, that's an incredibly impactful thing for you to remember. Is that right?
It was an impactful statement, yes.
And you remember it today as well as you remembered it the day she did it.
Yes.
I may have just a moment. Thank you. May I?
Yes.
It's just the entirety. I'm going to hand you a document. Did you, before I ask you about that specific document, did you review anything before you testified in preparation for your testimony today or Friday?
Yes.
Did you review your grand jury testimony?
I did, yes.
Understood. You did review your grand jury testimony, correct?
Yes.
So the document in front of you, you recognize it?
Yes.
That is, in fact, a true and correct copy of your grand jury testimony that you gave on April 26th, 2022. Is that right?
Correct.
You'll agree that your testimony in that case, in that hearing, rather, April of 2022, that was just a few months after the events in question, right?
Yes.
You were under oath at the time that you gave that testimony,
Yes.
and you were subject to the penalty of perjury when you were answering those questions, correct?
Yes.
Ms. Mccabe, I'd like you to turn to the page, since you've reviewed this, turn to the page of that document where you ever said in your testimony that my client said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him.
Was I asked what she said?
I get to ask the questions.
Well, I'd like you to direct me where to look.
I want you to look at the entire grand jury testimony if you need to, and turn to the page where you ever said that my client said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him.
I'm not sure if it's in this document, but I can tell you today with 100% clarity, she said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him on that morning.
So it's not in that document, is it?
I'm not sure if I could take the time, and do you want me to read over 200 pages?
May I approach?
Yes.
No, I don't want to take the time. Because you just indicated that you reviewed this document in anticipation of your testimony, right?
Correct.
So you've gone over it recently.
A few weeks back.
So we don't need to read it. You know that you never testified to that in the grand jury in April of 2022, don't you?
I don't know that as a fact. I would have to reread 222 pages, or however long it is.
You think you might have missed it when you reviewed your testimony in anticipation for, I'm sorry, when you reviewed your transcript in anticipation for your testimony?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
I read it a few weeks ago,
It's probably the most powerful part of your testimony, ma'am.
and I will never forget it.
Objection.
Okay, so that's stricken.
Would you agree? Do you think that's a powerful part of your testimony?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
It is, yes.
Did you see it in the transcript?
I cannot recall. It's over 200 pages.
May I approach you?
Yes.
These are select pages. It's 190, 192, 193, 201, 2, 8, and 5. I'm just going to show you these and ask questions about each group.
Yes. These are select pages out of your grand jury testimony. Isn't it true, Ms. Mccabe, that you were asked and you testified no fewer than 12 times what my client said, either at the scene or on the way to the scene?
At the scene, I was asked twice, according to this.
I question you, isn't it true that in April of 2022, you testified no fewer than 12 times, 12 separate statements you gave about what my client's statements were, either at the scene or in the car ride on the leading up to go into the scene? You remember that?
I do.
Okay. So on page 190 of what you're looking at, these should all be highlighted.
It is.
You testified that my client said to you over the phone at 4:53 a.m., she asked the question, did I hit him? You see that?
I do.
Number two, on page 192, talking about when y'all were in the car on the way to the scene, Karen asked the question, could I have hit him? You see that?
Yes.
Page 193, lines 1 through 2. You testified that in the car, once again, she asked the question, could she have hit him? You were relaying that, meaning could I have hit him, correct?
Correct.
Page 193, line 23. In John's driveway, she asked the question, quote, and she's asking if she could have hit him.
Yes.
Page 201, driving to Fairview. She asked the question, what if I hit him? And could I have hit him? Correct?
Correct.
Page 202, lines 1 through 2. While driving to Fairview, she asked the question, could I have hit him?
Correct.
Page 208, lines 24 through 25, outside at Fairview, she asked the question, did I hit him? And went on to ask, could I have hit him? Correct?
Correct.
And your testimony was also on page 208 that Karen was yelling nonstop in front of the female EMT, did I hit him? Could I have hit him? Is he dead? Correct?
Correct.
May I approach?
Yes.
That's 12 times that you reiterated under oath, under penalty of perjury, in April of 2022, what my client's statements were, either at the scene or leading up to getting to the scene. Correct?
Correct.
Every single one of those, 12 separate times, you indicated that she asked a question, something like, could I have hit him or did I hit him? Correct?
Correct.
Not one time in that testimony did you say she declared, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. Did you?
The questions that were asked, when she said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, that was at the scene in response to an officer asking questions. What I just read was us when she first called me, or when we were driving in the car, or when we were at John's house. So I was answering the question that I was asked.
So you believe that you weren't asked the question, did she say to an officer, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him? And if you're not asked the question, did she say to an officer, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him? You're not going to volunteer that she said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. That's your testimony.
No, that's not.
Your testimony.
My testimony is, an officer was asking her what his name was and different things about him. And at that point, she was saying, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him.
Which officer?
I do not recall.
Well, you recall the I hit him. You just told me that was the most impactful thing in the morning.
It was shocking.
So what officer did she say this to, supposedly?
I was more focused on her and her hysteria than which officer was asking the question.
So you have no idea who the officer was even, correct?
I'm not sure which officer was asking her. It could have been an EMT. Someone said, what is his name? Does he have medical conditions? How old is he?
But you were asked that question, ma'am. On page 208, you were asked what she said in front of the female EMT who was asking her questions. And her answer was, your answer was, she said, did I hit him? Could I have hit him? Is he dead? Is that right?
That is correct.
That might have been a good time to offer up that she confessed, I hit him, right?
Objection.
Sustained as to that form.
Ms. Mccabe, the truth of the matter is you've manufactured this new story for this jury because you think it helps you out.
Absolutely not.
You called 911 at 6:04 a.m. Is that right?
Yes.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, Exhibit 36 has already been marked and entered. I would ask to play a portion of that 911 tape, not the entirety of it.
Okay.
With the court's permission, I'd ask to play about runtime 1:30 to 1:45. If you can give me 2 seconds and pause it. Yes. Do you recognize the voice on that tape?
Yes, that's mine.
Appear to be a true and accurate, at least that portion, a true and accurate reporting of the 911 call that you made that morning?
It was a very brief clip. I'd have to hear more.
Go ahead and play, starting at runtime 1:30 to about runtime 1:45.
46 years old.
46, how long has he been outside?
I don't know. I don't know. He got out of the car and
Stop. Was that you? Is
Yes, it was.
that the 911 call?
Yes, it was.
And what did you just say?
I said, I don't know. He got out of the car.
He got out of the car,
Mhm.
is what you said, correct?
Yes.
And this was at 6:03 in the morning, correct?
Correct.
This is before you ever talked to Brian Albert,
Correct.
before you ever talked to your sister Nicole Albert,
Correct.
before you ever talked to Chris Albert,
Correct.
before you ever talked to Julie Albert.
Correct.
You hadn't talked to anybody at this point other than Carrie Roberts, correct?
And Karen Reed.
And my client.
Correct.
And in that 911 call, you said he got out of the car, didn't you?
I did, because Karen Reed had told me that she had left him there.
Your words were, he got out of the car, correct?
Correct.
Did you make any other calls other than to 911?
I called my sister.
What time was that?
I believe it was after the 911, but I'm not sure.
You claim that your sister didn't answer, is that right?
She did not answer.
But you do know that your phone extraction shows that that was an answered call at 6:07.
If that's what it shows, but I can tell you she did not answer the phone.
And you are as sure about that as you are, my client said, I hit him 3 times, right?
I certainly am, yes.
Perfect. You also called her at 6:08.
I might have called her twice, yes.
Your Honor, I have an exhibit. This may be as good a time as any to take a break. If you wish, I just have to cue it up. It's up to you. I don't mind.
Folks, we'll take morning news.
All rise, jury, please, sir.
You may be seated.
So, Mr. Jackson, when you said it's an exhibit, is it in evidence?
It's not.
Okay.
I'm going to ask to mark it. It's a digital recording of a 4-minute voicemail on John O'Keefe's phone. It does include the 911 call. I don't want to play the entirety of the 911 call, but I do want to play the entirety of this particular 4-minute voicemail.
Okay. Do you know what it is, Mr. Lally?
I do.
Okay. So, is there an agreement that it's coming in?
There's no objection to it.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I just needed to know if it would make sense for me to review it if there was an objection.
Thank you.
All rise to the court, please.
You are unmuted.
Thank you. May be seated for the session.
So, Mr. Jackson, is it all queued up, or do we need we need the witness, but were there any questions first, or were you just going to the video?
Questions? And
Okay.
I'll ask them.
All right, let's bring Ms. Mccabe in. Okay, whenever you're ready, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Mccabe, I want to go back very briefly to something you said just before we broke, and that was in respect of the statements that you attribute to my client out of the scene. You said, well, there was an officer possibly asking questions, or it could have been a female EMT, and I wasn't answering questions about that, correct? Hence, you didn't say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him.
Can you be clear on your question?
Let me rephrase that. Before we broke a few minutes ago, you had said, the reason I didn't say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, is because I was never asked. And the subject never came up about what an officer asked her when she declared that. So I just didn't offer it. And then you said, or it could have been an EMT.
Yes, I'm unclear who was there.
Isn't it true that at the grand jury, the question that was posed to you, and this is counsel page 208, grand jury. The question that was posed to you is, quote, so what happens next with yourself, Ms. Roberts, and Ms. Reed? And your answer was, so there are different, police officers getting statements from us. At one point, I'm standing with Ms. Reed, and she's saying, did I hit him? Could I have hit him? And there was, I believe, an EMT, a female, standing right next to me and listening to her yelling, did I hit him? Could I have hit him? Is he dead? Is he dead? Is he dead? It was pretty much nonstop. Remember that testimony?
I do.
So in point of fact, you were answering the direct question about what happened in front of the police officer and the EMT, correct?
There were multiple police officers and multiple EMTs present.
So now this is another police officer and a different EMT.
I'm not saying that.
Okay. But nowhere in this did you say that she declared the words, I hate him. Correct? We'll agree on that.
Correct.
Your Honor, I have an item I would like to have marked as next in order.
Okay.
Question. May I approach?
Yes.
I will bring it in one of that will be in Exhibit 96.
Thank you.
With court permission, I would like to play a portion of this and then stop it
Okay.
and ask the witness a couple of questions about it. Okay. It's audio only. Ms. Mccabe, I've paused the audio tape just to ask you a couple of foundational questions. Do you recognize what's on that audio tape?
Yes, that is my voice.
Okay. You recognize you starting a 911 call, correct?
Correct.
Similar to the call we just listened to a few minutes ago, which was the actual 911 call, correct?
What's the difference between the two of them?
I'm about to explain it. It's a confusing question, and I apologize. This appears to be an open voicemail overhearing your 911 call. Do you recognize that?
Now that you explain it, okay.
You hear a rhythmic boom, 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 boom.
The windshield wipers.
Okay, so that was my next question. That would have been an open voicemail that was recorded inside the cab of the SUV that you were seated in, correct?
Correct.
Overhearing you call 911 and overhearing whatever else was going on ambient noise at the scene, correct?
Correct.
Does that sound like a true and correct copy of at least the portion of the 911 call that you heard?
I have to listen to it again, but
Well, why don't we continue listening to it and see if you recognize it?
okay.
With the board's permission?
Yes.
It's about, by the way, it's about 4 minutes in total, Your Honor.
Okay.
Could you pause it? Do you hear a person in the background screaming?
Yes,
Who is that?
Miss Reed.
I'll go ahead and play this. Mr. King, did you hear the audio recording that we just marked into evidence?
I did. It was very muffled and some parts were very hard to understand.
Understood.
Mhm.
The person on the phone, who was that person?
I called 911.
And the person that was, for the most part, the person's voice that you could hear screaming, sounding sort of hysterical, who was that?
Karen.
Could you also hear Carrie Roberts' voice at various times in the background?
Yes.
And she was, for lack of a better word, trying to calm Karen down.
Yes.
And at some point telling her to sort of just shut up, you're not helping.
Yes, exactly.
Because she was so hysterical and so upset.
Erratic.
I want to play the rest of this. It appears that this recording is longer than your 911 call. You would agree with that?
Well, I'd have to see.
Well, the 911 call is already ended, correct?
I'm not sure how long was the 911 call.
Okay, this is about 3.5 minutes into a 4-minute recording. My only question is, would you agree that the 911 call is subsumed within this whole 4-minute recording?
I couldn't make that from that muffled.
You couldn't tell?
I couldn't tell. So if you have my phone record, you could, I'm assuming, tell when the 911 call ended, because I know the 911 call was long because there were multiple, they had transferred me multiple times.
Right. My question to you is, I'd like you to listen very, very closely, and I know that it is a muffled recording by definition. I'm not going to do that. From this point forward, I want you to pay very close attention. I want to ask you if you hear a voice, very muffled, toward the end of this recording. We can play it with your permission.
Yes.
Did you hear a muffled voice in the foreground after you heard Ms. Reed scream or yell?
I heard two people talking.
One of those was a very muffled voice on this recording, correct?
Most of the recording was muffled.
The one I'm talking about is I just played the voice that was muffled in the foreground of the audio recording, for want of a better phrase.
Yes, I heard that, yes.
Was that you?
I don't know if that was me.
There was nobody else in the cab of the car with you, was there?
I was standing at the trunk of the car, outside of the car.
Terry Roberts was over by Mr. O'Keefe,
Agree. Yes, they were kind of running back and forth at times.
and Karen was over by Mr. O'Keefe for most of that.
Yes,
But you were the one by the car.
back and forth. Hmm.
You called Nicole, your sister. By the way, did we finish playing this just for? Okay, thank you. Okay, that appears to be the end of the tape.
Okay.
Okay. You called your sister at 6:07 and 42 seconds, correct?
I don't have my phone record in front of me,
Does that sound about right?
approximately.
And you made a second phone call at 6:08 and 17 seconds. Does that sound about right?
I did call her twice, yes.
And both of those calls show in your extraction that they were answered phone calls, correct?
I don't have my extraction in front of me.
Well, you've been asked this question a bunch of times, right? You were asked this question at the other proceeding, is that right?
Yes,
You
and
were shown phone records.
well, if you have them, I could see them here.
You were shown phone records then.
Yes,
Okay. And at that time, you were confronted with the fact that the phone records show a 7-second call for 6:07, correct?
Objection.
I'm going to strike the word confronted. Go ahead and ask.
I'll pick another
Go
word.
ahead and
You
ask the
were- You
question.
were shown evidence that the 6:07 call lasted 7 seconds.
my sister never answered the phone.
Okay. I know you want to answer your own questions.
Yeah,
I'd like it if you'd answer my question. Were you shown records that showed the call lasted 7 seconds?
I cannot recall the exact record I was shown, but I was shown a phone record.
Okay. And you were shown that the same phone record showed that the 6:08 call lasted 8 seconds, right?
Again, I don't have it in front of me.
Does that sound about right?
About right, and there were a number of other calls that showed answered that weren't answered.
Well, we'll get to those in a minute. So the two calls at 6:07 and 6:08, at least the records indicate about 15 seconds worth of open line time, talk time. 7 seconds, 8 seconds, right?
You have the record in front of you, I don't.
I'm just asking if you were confronted, there's that word again, if you were shown records that established that based on your own phone extraction, your phone records, that the 6:07 call was a 7-second call, the 6:08 call was an 8-second call, right?
I was shown records, but I don't know exactly what they were, how long the call said, because she never answered the phone regardless.
You also made another phone call at 6:23, did you not? To Brian Albert?
If you could share my phone record, it would be very helpful.
Do you recall it?
I know I called my sister and I called my brother-in-law in the house. I do not know the exact times.
That's all I'm asking. You made a phone call to Brian Albert as well, right?
I believe so.
That was around 6:23. It was a few minutes after you had called Nicole twice, right?
Correct.
And that call was not answered.
None of them were answered.
But the record showed that that call was not answered, as opposed to Nicole's 2 calls, right?
Right.
Okay. The calls to Nicole were deleted from your phone before you turned that phone into law enforcement, weren't they?
Not by me.
By somebody else?
I never deleted any calls when I willingly handed my phone over.
You claim that you didn't delete calls, but you do know that your phone was forensically analyzed and those calls were in the deleted file folder, correct?
I have seen that, but there were 20 calls, all in a group that were all deleted. So cherry picking a few makes it look a different way.
Okay, so we'll get to those. I'm not cherry picking anything, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking you questions about the records.
Which I would love a copy of if I could see.
We'll get to that in a second. I'm just going by your memory. You've seen these records a bunch of times. You've been questioned about these records a bunch of times, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we know that you called at 6:07, 6:08, or thereabouts, and about 6:23. 2 to Nicole, 1 to Brian, correct?
Correct.
And you'll agree with me that notwithstanding those phone calls, by the way, did you leave voicemails?
No.
When did you hang up? Before it went to voicemail, or was it into voicemail before you hung up?
So it was a bit of a hysterical scene that morning, and I was in a state of shock, and I was just calling my sister and my brother-in-law. They did not answer the phone. I cannot tell you when I hung up because it was a hysterical scene. I was in a state of shock. Everyone was running around, and what seems to be forgotten is that my friend was lying there on the ground.
Oh, I don't think anybody's forgotten that. You, in fact, did not leave voicemails for any of those 3 calls, did you?
Again, I don't have my phone record in front of me.
And that's because Nicole didn't get any voicemails, because the calls were answered, right?
The calls were not answered.
You do agree with me that Brian Albert being a police officer, never came out of the house, right?
Correct. Neither did any neighbor.
I know you'd like to continue editorializing after the fact. There's probably a time and a place for it. This isn't it. If you can answer my question, I'd ask that you do that. Did Brian Albert come out of the house?
No.
Did Nicole Albert come out of the house?
No.
Thank you. How many of the initial police officers from Canton Police Department who responded to the scene were you friends with?
I would say I am friendly with Mike Lank. He was 5 years older than me. I knew him growing up. If I saw him around town, I would say, "Hey, how are you?" Pretty much that's the extent.
Anybody else other than Mike Lank that you were friends with?
Not that I am friends with. I knew of Officer Sean Good, but I wouldn't say I was friends with him. I just knew who he was.
And you also knew that Officer Lank was very good friends with the Albert family.
Good friends, yes.
You knew that Mike Lank and Chris Albert had a long-standing friendship, correct?
Correct.
You had just indicated you also knew Officer Good, is that right?
Didn't know him. I said I knew of him.
Okay. With regard to names like Sarah, Mulaney, not so much.
Sarif has a sister that's the same age as my sister, but I had never, to my knowledge, met Sarif.
And of all the officers who responded to the scene, the 2 who actually went inside the Albert home, to talk to Brian Albert and others was, in fact, Mike Lank and Officer Good.
I don't remember Officer Good in the house. I only remember Officer Lank.
The reason you know that, the reason you have a memory of what was happening inside the house is because you were allowed to actually go into that home, correct?
Correct.
And you went into that home before any of the officers went into the home. Is that right?
Correct.
You were allowed to have private conversations with Brian Albert.
I woke Brian Albert up.
Were you allowed to have private conversations with Brian Albert?
Yes.
And you were allowed to have private conversations with your sister, Nicole?
Yes.
And that was before the police ever went in to do any formal interviews of you, Brian, or Nicole, correct?
Correct.
Did you discuss in these private conversations how you three were going to answer any questions for the police when you were asked?
No.
Did you talk about what you were going to say in any respect?
We were in shock. There was no.
Did you talk about what Brian and Nicole were going to say in their interviews with the police?
No.
Did Brian Albert give you any advice as a police detective what you should do or say when you were interviewed?
No.
Did he give you any advice as a police detective what you should do with your cell phone?
No.
Did he tell you that the police might want to get a hold of your cell phone at some point?
No.
Did you two discuss the calls that you made to Nicole Albert at 6:07 and 6:08 and the call that you made to Brian Albert at 6:23?
No.
Did you ever discuss the idea of potentially deleting any of those calls that were made that early morning?
Absolutely not.
Would you tell us if you did?
Yes, because I'm an honest and truthful person.
Did you tell him which officers were outside?
I don't recall.
Did you tell him that Officer Lank, specifically, friend of the Alberts, was outside?
I don't recall.
And then your husband, Matt Mccabe, arrived at the scene, correct?
Correct.
He was allowed to come in the house as well, right?
I believe Officer Lank was in the house before Matt came into the house.
And a little bit later that morning, Julie Albert came over, correct?
Correct.
And by the way, Officer Lank, after just a few minutes, then left the house, correct?
Correct.
Leaving all the witnesses inside together.
Correct.
And I can't remember if I asked this question or just thought it out loud. Did Julie Albert come over?
She did.
And then Chris came over.
Yes.
Even Brian Higgins came over.
Correct.
These are all friends and family of yours, correct?
Not Brian Higgins. I had only met a handful of times.
But you consider him a friend.
A friend of Brian Albert's is how I would reference him.
Fair enough. So these are friends and family of Brian Albert.
Correct.
And everyone was permitted to discuss the circumstances of the evening before, going into the early morning hours, with each other with no police there, correct?
I sat with my family in shock and horror.
Were you allowed to discuss the circumstances of the night before, going into the early morning hours, amongst yourselves without any police presence? Yes or no?
There was no reason for us to be allowed or not allowed. We did nothing wrong.
Understand my question? Did you get it?
Yes, I understand your question.
Can you answer it, yes or no? Were you allowed, that group of folks, were you allowed to discuss the case without a police presence?
Yes.
Okay. So you listened during that friends and family gathering, you listened to what Brian Albert had to say, correct?
He didn't really say much.
He was able to listen to what you had to say?
Again, you're creating a scene that didn't happen.
Anything, Ms. McCabe, I'm asking some questions. If you don't seem to want to answer.
Objection, Your Honor.
All right, so let's ask a question and let's get an answer. Okay?
Yes or no? Was Brian Albert there within earshot when you discussed your version of what had happened?
I didn't discuss much. I sat there in shock and horror, so I spoke very little, to be honest with you.
But what little you did speak, he could hear.
Yes.
And Nicole could hear.
Yes.
And Chris Albert could hear.
Chris came much later.
And your husband, Matt Mccabe, he could hear.
Yes.
Okay. And then when Chris is talking about what happened at Waterfall, you could hear and Brian could hear. In other words, everybody could hear everybody.
Chris came much later. When Chris came, I was almost about to leave.
I'm guessing that the topic of what had happened was still on everybody's mind.
Everybody was trying to figure out what had happened.
And you're discussing it amongst yourselves. That's my point.
With my sister and my brother-in-law and my husband. Correct.
Before you left, you said you were about to leave. Before you left, another Albert came over to the house, correct?
I don't recall seeing him.
Who's him?
Kevin Albert.
How'd you know I was talking about Kevin Albert?
Because you said another Albert came over, and I was
6 brothers.
told later it was Kevin.
I see. So you believe that Kevin was not there when you were still there?
I was in a state of shock. He may have walked in.
I'm asking, do you remember?
I don't remember it, no.
He could have been.
He could have been, absolutely.
And you knew he was a Canton police officer.
Yes,
You had already gotten a call from Michael Proctor, hadn't you?
yes,
He told you he wanted to speak with you.
correct,
So you knew at that point that the Massachusetts State Police troopers had taken over the investigation of the case, correct?
correct.
Did Michael Proctor tell you that the Canton Police Department had been recused from the case?
Objection.
Sustained.
Let me ask it a different way. Did you have knowledge in any way, shape, form, or fashion, at that point, that Canton Police Department was not supposed to be involved in the case?
Objection.
Sustained.
Speaking of Trooper Proctor, when you first interviewed with him, that was January 29th, 2022. We've already discussed that a little bit today, correct?
Correct.
And he was taking notes while you were interviewing with him, is that right?
I believe so.
You mentioned on Friday your observations of the taillight that day, is that right?
Correct.
You told Mr. Lally that you indicated that the taillight looked, when you saw it, just like the photograph that he showed you, correct?
I told him it was hard to make out and with the snow on it, but it looked, in the picture that he showed.
He showed you a second photo, a close-up, basically, of the SUV and a Sally port.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yes,
And you said, yeah, that's the condition of the taillight, correct?
yes,
You also told Trooper Proctor about your observations of the taillight on that same day, the 29th, right?
correct,
That's literally the same day that you saw the taillight, correct?
correct,
Just a few hours later, is that right?
correct.
And what you told Trooper Proctor that day was that you, quote, saw a crack in it, end quote, correct?
I told him that the taillight was cracked.
Matter of fact, the words that you used were that you saw, and I'm not fighting you on those words. You saw that it was cracked. You actually said, I saw a crack in it, correct?
That's what he said, I said. I'm telling you, I said the taillight was cracked.
This is another example of him screwing up your words, correct?
You'd have to ask Trooper Proctor.
So I'm asking you, did you say, I saw a crack in it?
I said the taillight was cracked.
So you didn't say, I saw a crack in it, right?
I said the taillight was cracked.
The photograph that you were shown, with the court's permission, it's Exhibit 92, I believe, from Friday.
Okay.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
You see that photograph? You were shown this photograph on Friday. Does that look like the taillight has a crack in it?
It's cracked, yes.
It's actually completely missing. Isn't it?
Yeah. And I believe in one of the reports, one of the many reports, it will say that I said it was cracked in missing pieces.
Right. Does that look like it's cracked and missing pieces, or does that look like the entirety of the taillight is basically gone?
Again, in that picture, there are the red pieces, there are some of it still there. So it was cracked and missing. In a state of shock, that was my description.
Got it. So in a state of shock, you said there was a crack in it.
No,
Hours after.
I said it was cracked. I never said there was a crack in it.
So if Trooper Proctor wrote that down that would be an example of him getting your words wrong yet again.
Objection.
Correct?
That's been answered. Let's move on, please.
That's okay for that. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
I want to get back to January 29th, that interview with Trooper Proctor. After this interview with Michael Lank, you eventually made your way back to your house. Is that right?
Yes.
You went with your husband, Matt,
Yes.
and you knew that Trooper Proctor was going to show up and interview you and Matt, Mr. Mccabe, correct?
On the phone, he wanted to speak with me.
Is that a yes?
So I wasn't aware. He asked to speak with me. I wasn't aware if he was going to speak with Matt.
Okay. You were at least aware that you were going to be interviewed.
Correct.
You told Brian Albert that Trooper Proctor was planning on interviewing you as well.
Correct.
Before Trooper Proctor showed up to conduct that interview at your house, Brian Albert actually showed up at your house, correct?
Correct.
So Brian Albert made sure that he was in your home before Trooper Proctor made it to your house, correct?
Objection.
Distinct.
Brian Albert was in your home before Trooper Proctor was in your home. Is that right?
I am not sure who arrived first.
But he was there when you were interviewed, wasn't he?
He was upstairs, yes.
And you believe, of course, with that statement, he didn't hear anything about what was going to happen, right? He didn't hear
100.
anything about the interview.
No, I don't think he could hear it from where he was.
But you knew he was just a few feet away.
I knew he was up in my bedroom.
We've talked a little bit about your call records, and I want to pivot for a second and ask you about those call records. This is Exhibit 90. Donna, may I approach?
Yes.
Thank you.
Do you recognize that document?
I do, yes.
You were shown this document last week, is that right?
Correct.
This is a forensic extraction report of John O'Keefe's cell phone that you were shown on Friday, right?
Correct.
You acknowledge that it's an accurate report of calls found on John's phone between you and him. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, and this shows the calls that you made to John's phone or you received from John's phone on or between or at or between 12:14 a.m. and 12:50 a.m. I want to direct your attention to those time frames, correct?
Correct.
All right, I want to start at the bottom, and it may go in reverse chronological order.
Okay.
I think it does. At 12:14, it shows that you called John O'Keefe and that call was answered. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
At 12:18 a.m., it shows that John O'Keefe called your phone and that was answered as well.
Correct.
And then at 12:29 a.m., you also called John O'Keefe's phone and y'all had a short conversation as well. Is that right?
No.
The record shows, I think it shows, pardon me. Unknown, correct? In terms of whether it was missed or answered?
Excuse me, can you repeat that?
Sure. The 12:29, I want to concentrate on the 12:29 a.m. call.
Okay.
That one, in the Celebrite extraction, it shows in terms of whether the call was answered or not, the status is unknown, correct? It's on the last page,
Yeah,
second row from the top.
at 12:29. Unknown, yes.
Unknown. However, you've already acknowledged that y'all did have a short conversation on that 2:29
No.
call, correct?
We didn't speak at 2:29. We spoke at 12:14 and we spoke at 12:18. We never spoke at 12:29.
So you're indicating that the 12:29 call was either missed or otherwise? Went to voicemail, something.
The 1229, yes.
Okay. I want to show you a document. Well, let me ask it this way. According to this, there were 6 more calls between your phone and John O'Keefe's phone.
Correct.
Counting, correct? 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. And that's before, or that's up to 12:50 a.m. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. I'd like to show you another document. Or if I could approach briefly. May I?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll take, so we don't get them mixed up, I'll take exhibit 90 back.
Okay. Thank you.
I want to show you one more document that you weren't shown on Friday. Do you recognize this one?
No.
Okay. If you look where it indicates on the left column, I'm just putting my thumb here, the
Okay.
left column, the MSISDN user, there's a number that ends there. 0142, 0142.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes.
So I'm going to answer this question before we approach.
I have no idea what we're approaching about this document.
Yes.
Why don't we just go up there?
Sure.
May I have that, please? I know you need to look at it.
Your Honor, just for ease of maintenance, may I approach and handle
Yes.
this an unredacted version?
Yes.
Same thing. Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If you look on the left column, Ms. McCabe,
Yes.
you'll see something that says Apple ID.
Yes.
Look to the right of it. Do you recognize that unredacted portion? I don't want you to read it out or anything. You recognize that?
Yes.
Whose Apple ID is that?
That's mine.
Okay, if you look 6 lines below that, there's a full phone number. Again, don't read the phone number out. Just tell me if you recognize it.
I do.
Whose is that?
That's mine.
Okay. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'll take the unredacted copy back.
Okay.
So we don't get it mixed up. Does this appear to be Cellbrite extraction of your phone records, your Apple ID?
Yes.
Okay. And you recognize, without telling me what it is, you recognize that phone number as your phone number back at the time and the Apple ID back at the time,
Yes.
associated with the phone that you then turned in to law enforcement, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You just looked at the extraction report for John O'Keefe's phone, and you saw those calls between your phone and John O'Keefe's phone after going from 12:14, after that all the way up to 12:50, correct?
Correct.
Take a look at the last couple of pages, page 3 and 4 of your own cell phone extraction report. And tell me if you see a single call listed between you and John O'Keefe for January 29th between 12:14 and 12:50.
There are calls to a number that I'm assuming is John.
What
I'm
time?
just not sure. I see a call. Wait a minute. This report has times everywhere.
Right. It's chronological except for the calls that were deleted. You see a call at 5:52 to John O'Keefe's phone.
I see a call at 5:52, yes.
But there's not a single call before 5:52 a.m. between 12:14 and 12:50 a.m. Is that right? Not one.
It's very hard to this report time-wise.
You can look at every single time on the report. There's not that many.
I'm just trying to say that it goes from 7:21 to 5:52 to 7:33 to 7:49. There's no order. They're out of order.
I understand that, Mr. McCabe, but if you look at every one of the entries, there's not a single entry for 12:14, 12:18, or any of the subsequent 12:29, any of the subsequent phone calls that are all shown on John O'Keefe's phone extraction. Would you agree with that?
Correct.
May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, I would move for the admission of NN as an exhibit.
Okay, is there an objection?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 97.
May I inquire, Your Honor?
Yes.
The fact of the matter is, according to those Cellbrite records and that extraction from your own phone, every one of the calls that you made to John O'Keefe's phone between 12:29 and, between 12:14 and 12:50 a.m. was deleted and unrecovered, correct?
I didn't understand that report, and I'm not an expert.
When you compare the two, you saw a bunch of calls on John O'Keefe's phone, right? You know he couldn't have deleted them. He passed away, right?
Correct.
You saw your cell phone extraction, which is the handshake for John O'Keefe's phone. And all of your calls are missing, right?
Objection.
Can you answer that question?
I'm confused. That paper, I don't understand it. It was vague. There were numbers. There were calls everywhere. There was a number of missing calls.
There's a bunch of missing calls, right? You didn't see any of the calls that were reflected on John O'Keefe's phone. Is that right? Yes or no? They're not there.
A lot of calls are missing. I'm not really even sure what's there because the numbers are it's all redacted.
So you were not seeing any redacted calls, Ms. Smith.
The page you just had in front of me was redacted.
It's now an exhibit.
It's now exhibit. Your personal information was redacted. None of the calls were redacted now.
The numbers, I don't know people's phone numbers. I just have them as contacts.
Ms. Mccabe, you just said a second ago, and we can do this all day long, or we can just make it simple. The fact of the matter is that report did not show any of the calls that John O'Keefe's phone report showed, correct? From 12:14 to 12:50.
I believe there was one on there.
5:52. That's the next morning, ma'am. Right?
Were there other calls in that time period on the Celebrate?
You just said there weren't. You just looked at them.
I've told you that Celebrate report was extremely hard to read.
Right. Fact is, there are no calls on your own phone extraction between you and John O'Keefe between 12:14 and 12:50. Would you just agree with that, at least on that report?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
The fact is that you deleted your call records before you turned your phone in, didn't you, Ms. Mccabe? That's what that report shows.
Absolutely not.
You sanitized your phone because you didn't want the police to know who you had been calling or the fact that you had been calling John O'Keefe's phone incessantly, correct?
Incorrect. I willingly turned over my phone.
After you deleted your phone call logs, correct?
Absolutely not.
What date did you turn your phone over?
Possibly February 3rd.
How many days after this incident was that?
4 or 5.
So you had plenty of time to talk to that friends and family group and ultimately decide to delete your phone calls, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you ever have any group chats with family members who are witnesses in this case?
Yes.
May I approach you?
Yes.
Look through those. While Mr. Lally is looking through that packet, can I just ask to make sure the record is clear? Did you delete any of your calls before you turned your phone into law enforcement?
I spoke with the 2 officers that I handed my phone over to, and I asked if I could delete the personal conversations with my daughters. And they said absolutely yes, that I could.
So other than calls with your daughters that you did you delete any other calls on your phone at all?
There were text messages. It was actually text messages with my daughters that I deleted, and that was all I deleted.
Did you delete any phone calls?
I do not recall deleting any phone calls at all. I would have no reason to delete anything.
So that's very different than I didn't delete any phone calls. I do not remember deleting phone calls means you might have.
In day-to-day life, people delete things, but I do not recall deleting any phone calls.
In day-to-day life, did you delete any of the calls to John O'Keefe?
No,
Did you delete any of your calls with Nicole Albert?
no,
Did you delete any of your calls with Brian Albert?
no,
With Chris Albert?
no,
With Julie Albert?
no,
Colin Albert?
no,
With any of the witnesses in this case, did you delete any calls before you turned that phone over?
no, no.
May I please, John?
Yes.
Ms. McCabe, I'm handing you a packet of documents. It appears to be about 10 pages long. Do you recognize what's in those documents?
Yes,
You indicated already that you were part of a group chat with certain members of your family and friends.
correct.
Did that group chat, I'm most interested in the group chat between yourself, Nicole Albert, Brian Albert, Matt McCabe, on or around, that group chat starting on or around February 1st, 2022.
Okay.
Does that look like a true and accurate reflection of the text messages between, or certain of the text messages between and among that group?
Yes, the ones I've seen, yes.
On February
Can you just
1st
tell me what page you're on? I'm sorry.
Of course, Your Honor.
The bait stamp number?
2148.
Okay,
where
thank
I'm
you.
going to start.
Thank you.
And they should go relatively chronologically, Your Honor, page by
Okay.
page. On February 1st, 2022, around 2:15 in the afternoon on this group chat, did you receive a message from your husband on the group? This is on page 2148. And it should be the middle bubble, the middle and the bottom bubble. Quote, Julie said channel 4 is in DE. You see that?
Yes,
And the response from Matt McCabe is eating, I assume, quote, ask Chris to ask some questions. Tell them the guy never went in the house, end quote. You see that?
yes.
You look at the next page, the top,
Mm-hmm.
149. There's a one-word answer from Brian Albert.
Mm-hmm.
What is that answer?
Exactly.
Does it appear to you from this chat that Matt McCabe was directing witnesses, specifically Chris Albert, what to say to the news media?
Objection.
I'll allow that. Is that what you're seeing?
That is not how I would understand this.
He never went in the, tell them he never went in the house was the story that had been concocted between and among this group of people on this chat, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
No. John never went in the house. It wasn't a story. It was the truth. And it is the truth.
Just like she said, I hit him.
Correct.
So according to this chat, at least, at the very base level, this is one witness telling another witness to give certain information to the media that could be useful to the group, correct? Tell them the guy never went in the house, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
Matt McCabe was directing Chris Albert. Chris Albert wasn't even at the house, was he?
Chris Albert was not at the house, no.
But this chat is Matt McCabe, your husband, telling Chris Albert, who was never at the house and would have no personal knowledge of what happened at the house, to specifically say, the guy never came in the house. The guy, by the way, being John O'Keefe. Right?
That's what he wrote.
Does that sound to you a little bit like collusion?
Objection.
Sustained.
At some point, you sought out Carrie Roberts' cell phone number shortly after the 29th, or maybe not, maybe on the 29th. correct?
Correct.
You didn't have her cell number in your phone?
No.
One of your primary concerns was to make sure that you got in contact with Carrie Roberts before the day's end, right?
I wanted to speak to Carrie as she was on her way to the hospital, and I wanted to check in on John.
One of your primary concerns, Ms. Mccabe, was that you wanted to make sure you got a hold of Carrie Roberts and had communication with her before the end of the day.
It had nothing to do with getting in touch with her by the end of the day. It was a friend reaching out, wondering how her friend was doing, who was just taken off the front lawn.
On the 29th.
Yes,
So before the end of the day, Ms. McCabe, you can do this all day long. Before the end of the day, you were trying to get a hold of Carrie Roberts, correct?
immediately in the morning, I wanted to get in touch with her.
Right. So you sought out her phone number. First you tried my client, Karen Reed, correct?
Correct.
But then you found another source for that information. Is that right?
Correct.
And you said just a second ago you were claimed that you needed that information because you knew that she was on the way to see John O'Keefe's parents,
She was picking them up.
and you wanted to check on them.
Correct.
You've been friends with the O'Keefe family for years, haven't you?
Correct.
So you didn't have a need to get Carrie Roberts' phone number, did you?
I wanted to speak with Carrie, see how she was doing. I was not going to call Peg.
You had her phone number, didn't you?
I do, yes.
So if you wanted to check on somebody, you could have just called her.
I was not going to call Peg O'Keefe on the way to see her son at the hospital.
Check on your friend? That was just too much.
I wanted to ask Carrie. I am sure she was boggled down and probably did not want to speak with anyone. It was a simple thing. I made sure I got Carrie Roberts' number so I could check in and see how John was doing. Also, we had just been through an extremely traumatic event together. There's nothing evil
Carrie
here.
Roberts' number, Ms. McCabe, is because you wanted to make sure that you controlled her story as she left your site, correct?
Absolutely not.
Did you take any steps whatsoever to influence Carrie Roberts' statements?
No.
Because that would be collusion, wouldn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you write a text to the group, including Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, and Matt McCabe, where you informed them that, quote, and this is, Your Honor, on page 2158, where you informed them, quote, Carrie is here going over timeline, end quote.
Correct.
So you reported back to Brian, Nicole, and Matt that Carrie was where?
She came over my house.
And you two sat down and went over a, quote, timeline together.
Peggy spoke to Carrie.
Yes or no? I didn't ask about Peggy.
Well, that's where the timeline started at.
Did you ask Carrie, or did Carrie show up at your house and, quote unquote, go over a timeline with you?
Carrie showed up asking to sit down with me to do a timeline so we would remember everything that had happened.
And you wanted to be super helpful about that, right?
Objection, Your Honor.
Ask it differently.
Sure. You wanted to be helpful to Carrie Roberts.
The two of us were trying to figure out what had happened to our friend.
And so you made sure that you created and drafted with Carrie Roberts a timeline for her, correct?
I didn't make sure of anything. She was the one that asked me to do it.
And not only did you create a timeline, you then reported back to your group, Ryan Albert, Nicole Albert, Matt McCabe, that she was creating this timeline with you on February 1st, 2022. Isn't that right?
Yes.
After you created or drafted this timeline with Carrie, she actually sat for an interview with the police, did she not? That's not in the chats. I'm just asking. She sat down for an interview with the police, didn't she?
When?
You tell me. It's my question.
I'm not sure of when you're talking about.
Okay, let's start over.
Yes.
After this timeline was created on February 1st,
Mm-hmm.
at some point thereafter, Carrie Roberts conducted a formal interview with the police about this case, correct?
Do you have the report of that date?
We're sort of bearing the lead. She did the interview in your living room, ma'am. Right?
There was, on Tuesday, 2 officers came to the house and she sat in the other room and spoke with them.
So, using my question, she did the interview at your house.
Oh, they came to my house to interview me and she happened to be there. So they asked if they could speak with her also.
Okay. Did she or did she not do an interview at your house?
Did, yes.
That wasn't that hard. You were present for that interview, weren't you?
I was eating dinner.
You were present for the interview, Ms. Mccabe,
I was in the house, yes.
and you listened to that interview, didn't you?
No, I did not.
You made sure you gave Carrie Roberts everything she needed for that interview, correct? Quote, everything she might need for that interview, didn't you?
And where is this that you're quoting
I'm
from?
asking you.
Oh, I'm sorry. When you quoted, I thought it was in here. I apologize.
We'll get to it in a second. Did you tell her everything that you wanted her to say?
No, I did not.
Did you in any way attempt to influence her testimony before she gave that interview in your living room?
Absolutely not. Carrie is her own person.
But then you did report her progress to the Albert and McCabe group in that group chat, didn't you?
Can you show me where, please?
Sure. Isn't it true that in a group text with Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, Matt McCabe, you wrote, and this is on page 2159, quote, and we handed handed phone to Carrie. Remember that?
I see that, yes.
And the very next text is from you telling the group she's telling him everything in all caps, 2 exclamation points.
Yes.
And then you went on to say at 2:55 p.m., at basically the same moment, quote, all this stuff, end quote. Correct?
Correct.
So when you said a couple of minutes ago that you weren't listening to what she was saying, that was a lie, wasn't it?
We're talking about 2 different interviews. I'm talking about when the officers came to my house and spoke to her there. You're saying that I handed the phone over, so that would be a different interview.
Okay, this is on February 1st at 2:55. I wasn't there. You were there. She was in your house on February 1st giving an interview to the police, wasn't she?
One day she was there giving an interview to the police.
And while she was there,
But I do not believe it was at 2:55. It was later in the evening. So I think you might have 2 events confused.
so either way, whether she was on the phone with the police or sitting there in your living room with the police, you were listening to her and reporting back to the group, she's telling them everything.
No, it's not correct. The one that she did with the police, she did in the other room. And the one she did on the phone, I said, she's telling them everything.
I know.
Because Carrie is an extremely blunt person and she was giving personal feelings about the situation. And I was horrified by it.
To the police.
To the police.
And you're listening.
I heard a statement she said that horrified me.
And then you're reporting it back to the group, weren't you?
That one thing she stated, I reported back to the group, yes.
So you're listening in on a police interview, correct?
It was a phone call.
One side of it, right?
It was a phone call.
You're listening in on a police interview, one side of it, correct?
Correct.
You're eavesdropping on that interview, correct?
I'm sitting with her and she's taking the call.
And then you're reporting that interview back, or her success in that interview, in your mind, back to the group involving Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, and Matt McCabe. Isn't that what you're doing?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
I absolutely not. That is not how it went. I was horrified because Carrie's a blunt person, not like me. And she had made a comment about Miss Reed and Mr. O'Keefe's relationship. And I was shocked and horrified that she said it the way that she did.
You're so shocked and horrified that
I said, oh my God, she's telling them everything. Yes.
you decided it was so important that you needed to report that back to Brian Albert and his friends.
I was,
sorry, Sam.
I was horrified.
So you reported that back.
Yes, I said she told them everything.
When you were first confronted with these messages at a separate proceeding in June of 2023, you claimed that you couldn't remember what that exchange was about, correct?
Correct.
And now you just all of a sudden have this newfound memory of exactly what that text message was referring to, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yes, because Kerry Roberts said a statement and it jogged. I said, oh my God, that's what I meant when I said she said everything.
When did she say this statement?
Probably in the fall. She has made this statement a few times in reference to Karen.
You and Kerry Roberts are still coordinating your statements together.
Oh no, we're not. It's just an opinion she has of Miss Reed.
And all of a sudden that became your, quote, everything, all the stuff.
It didn't just become it. I forgot that I had written it, and one day Kerry made the statement, and I'm sure it happens to everyone. You forget something, and then you're like, oh my God, that's what it was.
I'm not sure that happens to everyone.
Objection.
Sustained.
Let me ask you a different question. When you were asked under oath a year ago, when things were fresher in your mind, you were asked specifically what you were referring to, and your answer was, I have no idea, correct?
Correct.
Because you didn't want to tell them that you had coordinated your statement with Kerry Roberts. Isn't that right?
No, that is not right. I did not remember what it was.
Went on to be asked specifically, do you know who you were referring to? And you said, maybe Kerry, maybe. I'm talking to Kerry. And the question was, but you don't recall this text? And your answer was, I don't remember. That's what you testified to a year ago, correct?
Correct.
But now you're talking about some memory of a disparaging comment that Kerry Roberts has about my client. And that's the everything in your mind.
Yes, the things that she was saying.
Quite obviously, what you were referring to in that text in real time, Ms. Mccabe, was that Kerry Roberts was telling the police, quote, everything that you had laid out for her in this timeline meeting you had with her, correct?
Objection.
So it's sustained as to that form. You can ask that question in a proper way.
The everything you referred to in that text in real time was what you had worked out with Kerry in that timeline meeting, wasn't it? That was the everything you were referring to, correct?
Incorrect. We never worked together to come up with a story. We have the facts, and the everything was a comment about your client.
You went on in your group chat with Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, and Matt McCabe to give running updates about whether or not Kerry Roberts was actually following the script, correct?
Incorrect. There was no script.
167. Matt McCabe texted the group, Brian, comma, sitting separate, end quote, correct?
Yes.
Sounds like Matt McCabe is reporting back to Brian Albert, following your instructions, we're sitting separately.
Objection.
Sustained.
One minute later, Brian Albert had a one-word response to the Brian sitting separate, correct?
Yes.
What was that one-word response?
Okay.
So it sounded like he was giving his approval for where people were situated in that meeting, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
At page 2168, 515.
It's very hard to just look at two texts and try to understand what the context is.
Ms. McCabe, if you don't understand a question that I have, just let me know, but otherwise let me ask a question. On page 2168, at 515, you wrote the group, quote, you listening, correct?
Yes.
And at the same time, 515, you then wrote, cops here again, end quote, correct?
Correct.
That was in reference to the police coming over to your house to further interview Kerry Roberts, wasn't it?
That was when they came to talk to me.
And Carrie Roberts was there.
Was at my house, correct?
And a few minutes later at 5:23, Nicole Albert texts, "Call us after." Correct?
Correct.
And a few minutes after that, Matt Mccabe texts, quote, "This girl could write a book, ... nonstop." Correct?
Correct.
So obviously Matt Mccabe, along with you, was listening to Carrie Roberts give her interview.
We were sitting in the kitchen eating dinner with our children, and Carrie Roberts was in a different room, but she was going on and on and on as she does because they were in the other room.
And you could listen.
I could hear voices.
You could hear her interview with the police.
Did not hear her interview. I could hear them talking, but I was sitting at a table with my children eating dinner, getting ready to go to a basketball game.
You then responded to Matt McCabe. I love it.
Yes.
And then you responded about this interview you just testified under oath and under penalty of perjury, not hearing anything about, just hearing voices. Your next text was, quote, "She is telling them everything,"
Yes.
end quote. Correct?
Yes.
So what you said just a few minutes ago about not knowing what she was saying, I could just hear voices, that was a lie.
It was.
Okay.
Objection.
Sustained.
And a couple of seconds later, Nicole Albert responds, one word. What was her response?
Good.
So in order, those texts say, "You listening?" You say, "You listening?"
Objection, Your Honor.
The objection sustained.
At the end of the day, you were eavesdropping on an interview that Carrie Roberts was having with law enforcement in their official capacity, weren't you?
No, I was sitting eating dinner, and some of the things, obviously, I overheard, but I was not eavesdropping. I'm saying there's a possibility, if I'm sitting in this room eating dinner and someone's in another room talking, you can hear bits and pieces. Was I eavesdropping? No. Is there some big cover-up story? No.
Well, why, Ms. McCabe, does your testimony keep evolving? A second ago, you said, you told this jury, you said, I couldn't hear a thing. All I could hear was voices, like muffled voices from the other room. She was going on and on about something.
Yeah.
And then when I confronted you with the text message where you said, she's telling them everything, now it's, well, I may have heard a couple of things. Which is it?
No, she was going on and on and on like she does.
And you were listening on and on and on like you do.
I was probably hearing bits and pieces.
Why was it so important to report back to the group that you were happy that Carrie Roberts was saying, quote, everything?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
We had both lost our friend. Carrie Roberts was in shock, as was I in shock. The two of us had all this information that just kept coming back to us and back to us. And it's terrifying when you go through an experience and you're in shock. And Carrie was remembering things. I was remembering things. So I was happy for her that she was piecing it all together, and I had pieced it all together because at the end of the day, our friend was dead, and we were trying to figure out what had happened to him together. There was no direction. We were all trying to figure out what had happened, because that's what you do when you lose somebody you love.
Were you happy for her, or were you happy for you and Brian and Matt and Nicole?
For me and for her, because we were going through this together. There was no
You
conversation.
got the story out that you're trying to get out through Carrie Roberts. Right?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
There is no story. There's facts and truth on this side. There's no story. The story that you've created is not the truth.
Did I create, I hit him, or did you?
That's fact.
A fact that conveniently you didn't mention in your report to Lank, grand jury, right? That kind of fact.
Objection.
Is that right?
That is a fact I mentioned. So in some reports, it's there.
The fact is, you wanted to keep very close tabs on Carrie Roberts, didn't you?
No.
On January 29th, if you look on page 2223, you text the group, quote, Carrie talked to cops and kept it simple, end quote.
Yes.
Okay, it's becoming a habit for you to keep tabs on Carrie Roberts, isn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
You'll agree that over and over and over and over again, you're reporting to this tight group, Nicole, Brian Albert, your husband, how Carrie's doing in her stories to the police, aren't you? Over and over and over.
I am telling them what is going on. I wouldn't say it. Well, let's count them. Was there 4 of them? You're saying over and over and over and over. It's a bit extreme.
I see. So you take issue with the way that I phrased over and over and over.
Well, it's misleading, I believe.
I see. Okay. Well, let me see if I can try this in a non-misleading way, Mr. McCabe.
Okay.
So at least one of us. I'll withdraw. You consistently reported back to the group how Carrie Roberts was doing with the police, didn't you?
I would update them after Kerry saw and spoke to the police. Again, we were all trying to figure out what had happened to John.
There's yet another text from Brian's wife, Nicole, on January 29th, and this is on page 2226. And she says, quote, we'll get more info tomorrow. Don't want to text about it, end quote. And then you texted, right, correct?
Correct.
What's that about?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
We decided that we would talk on the phone. My children look on my phone. Her children look on her phone. We were working with the police. I was sharing information and everything that had happened. We didn't want it to leave our little circle because we were trying to figure out what happened, and we're not going to go running around letting people see, oh my gosh, they think this might have happened or that might have happened. It was nothing more than let's not text about it.
So you wanted to keep it, in your words, in your little circle, correct?
Correct. I didn't want it all out there what we had thought had happened. I was going to let the police do their job.
So by definition, the info that Nicole Albert was talking about, that needed to be kept very tight, very secret, correct?
We needed the police to do their job, so we weren't going.
Texts, and Nicole wanted her texts, and the group wanted their texts to be kept secret and private. Isn't that right?
Not secret and private. We just weren't going to communicate certain things over text.
Did you give, or did anybody give you any private information the next day on January 30th?
Didn't even give me private information.
So let me put it in context. That text from Nicole Albert, we'll get more info tomorrow. I don't want to text about it. That was on the 29th, right?
Okay.
So, did you get additional info on the 30th, the next day?
I have no idea.
Did anything significant happen on January 30th in connection with this case? Any meetings, any get-togethers, anything that you can think of?
I went to the O'Keefe's house.
Other than that, anything else?
On the way home, Carrie Roberts' daughter is good friends with Michael Lank. So we dropped her off at Michael Lank's house, and Mike's wife came out of the house, him and Kerry are friends, and she, jumped in the car and was consoling Kerry and asks how the O'Keefes were doing. And, we talked to her.
So you pulled up to Michael Lank's house on the 30th. That's never been reported, has it?
I guess I never thought much of it.
Never thought about reporting the fact that one of the first responding officers on the case, working for Canton PD, which is considered off the case, you had a meeting with, it was unreported the next day?
I didn't meet with Michael Lank.
I see. So you pulled up in the car. Tell me about that again. You pulled up in the car and what happened?
And Lex, her daughter, went into the house.
Okay. And then you just drove away?
No. Michael's wife came out of the house.
Okay. And y'all had a conversation about what?
She got in the car and her and Kerry are friends, and she was checking on Kerry and, just saying, oh my God, this is so crazy, just checking in on the O'Keefes.
How long did that take?
Well, Kerry's a talker, so could have been an hour.
Could have been an hour standing outside?
Sitting in the car.
Sitting in the car on February 30th. Never came in the house?
Not February 30th.
I said February 30th. January 30th. Never went in the house?
I might have ran in to go to the bathroom.
It's the back end of a blizzard. It's freezing cold outside.
Mm-hmm.
Sitting in the car for an hour?
The car was running, Kerry, and they were talking. It's her friend.
Did you have any conversation before your testimony today with anybody about you going to Michael Lank's house on January 30th? Anybody?
Yes.
Tell me about that. Who was it and when?
It was a couple of weeks ago at the DA's office.
The DA's office had an interview with you, correct?
Not an interview. They just explained this process.
I mean, a conversation? How about that?
Yeah. Yes.
You met with folks at the DA's office. Who'd you meet with?
Mr. Lally, Miss McLaughlin, Steve Nelson, Trooper Brian Tully, I believe, and another woman, I can't remember her name, unfortunately.
Someone from the DA's office?
Yes.
Beelan?
No.
Lynn Beelan?
No, she's here today. She works with Steve Nelson.
Ah. But an employee of the DA's office.
Yes.
That sounds like a pretty big meeting.
I wouldn't call it a big meeting. There was, 5 of them?
How long did you, 5 of them and then you? Right?
My daughter Allie came with me also.
The meeting's getting bigger. Anybody else?
No, we both went.
Was Allie in the room when you were, I was going to say interviewed, but you take issue with every word I used. When you were talked to by the DA?
Allie and I were both in the room when they went over everything, how this all works, because this is all brand new to us. And then they asked me to leave the room.
You were about to say, and I lost the end of that sentence, when they received what?
I didn't mean the word received.
Did you receive anything?
No, I looked at my grand jury notes.
Now, at this meeting, was anybody taking notes?
No.
You have a bunch of lawyers and DAs, and nobody has a notepad in front of them? Like notes?
I believe Mr. Lally had a number of folders on the table.
Taking notes in their...
I do not believe anyone was taking notes. It was a casual meeting to explain this process.
Was that meeting recorded in any way that you're aware of?
No.
How long did the meeting last?
Allie and I were probably in the room, approximately 20 minutes. Then I left and they spoke with her. And then I went back in and they spoke with me.
How long did they speak with you?
Honestly, maybe a half hour.
And during that half hour to an hour, did they go over with you what they expected your testimony to be?
They never spoke about what they expected my testimony to be. They just showed me some pictures that might be shown. I listened to the 911,
What pictures?
just of the house and how I'd be asked to, show, okay, we're going to put a picture of the house and you'll have a laser.
Ms. Mccabe, when we started this conversation, it was because you said, in answer to my question, was anything ever brought up to you about this meeting at Lank's house?
Mhm.
You said yes.
Mhm.
So obviously they did talk to you about your testimony. It wasn't just about the process, correct?
I asked what discovery had been turned in regard to me.
So you wanted to prepare to make sure that you knew what you might be asked on cross-examination, correct?
I wanted to know what was coming, yes.
And you knew that one of the things was coming after this meeting. Well, let me ask it a different way. During this meeting, did Mr. Lally tell you one of the things that's going to be coming is you had an off-the-books meeting at Lank's house for 45 minutes? Did he tell you that?
No, that's not how I was told.
Did he tell you that the defense had uncovered a report that established that you were actually at Michael Lank's house for 45 minutes that had never been reported to the defense or the prosecution before the phone extraction had been done? Did he tell you that?
I was asked, oh, were you at Michael Lank's on the 30th?
So you've had a lot of time to come up with a story about why you were at Michael Lank's, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
I didn't need time to make up a story because I have the truth of why we went.
And the truth, according to you, is you pulled up at Michael Lank's house. The first responding officer and friends of the Alberts had a meeting with him the next day that was never reported to anybody for any purpose. You just met with his wife out in the car while the car was running for 45 minutes to an hour. That's your story.
It's not a story, it's the truth. Carrie dropped her daughter off. The wife came out. Carrie is a talker. They started talking. A tragedy had happened the day before.
It is interesting, would you not agree, that the day before you had this off-the-books meeting at Michael Lank's house, Nicole Albert says, we'll get more info tomorrow, meaning the very day you show up at Lank's house.
Again, I never spoke with Mike Lank at his house. It was not an off-the-books meeting. It was Carrie dropping her daughter at one of her good friends' house, whose husband happens to be a Canton cop. That is what it is. That is the truth.
And a lot of coincidences. Do you agree?
Objection.
Sustained.
Yeah, that's 12 years.
Yes.
That's, by the way, what did Mr. Lally show you in respect of this issue about this meeting at Michael Lank's house?
He showed me nothing.
He just told you about it.
Brian Tully told me.
Okay, what did Mr. Tully tell you? Trooper Tully. What exactly did he tell you at this meeting about this Michael Lank issue?
He said, did you go to Michael Lank's on January 30th? And at first I said, no, I've never been to his house. And then I thought about it and I said, oh my gosh, yes, I did go there. And that was the extent of the conversation.
You said, yeah, I did go there, and he didn't ask a follow-up, like, what the heck were you doing at Michael Lank's house the day after this issue?
Objection.
Incident.
I'll allow it.
He didn't ask a follow-up like that?
I do not believe he did.
So Trooper Tully had you come down for an interview. He confronted you with a fact that had never been disclosed before, to wit, you showed up at Michael Lank's house, and when you said, hang on, I think your words were, oh my gosh, yeah, I think I did go there. And he didn't ask a follow-up question?
He was there You're,
Yes,
you're spinning all of this.
Ma'am, I do a lot of things.
Yeah.
I don't spin. There's a judge here to make sure that I don't spin. I'm asking you a question. It's very direct.
I do not believe he asked me a follow-up question.
So that was the end of that conversation about Michael Lank, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Lally didn't have any follow-up questions.
I don't believe Mr. Lally was in the room.
Who else? I thought you said Mr. Lally and Mr. McLaughlin. I thought-
They were. They might not have been in the room at that time.
I see. So Mr. Lally just happened to, just saunter out?
It was a different time.
So Mr. Lally was in and out of the conversation?
Mr. Lally was not there when this conversation happened.
Well, why is that?
Because I met with Brian Tully and he was not there.
Is Brian Tully taking notes?
No.
He's a state trooper interviewing a witness. And
He was-
Objection.
Sustained.
The same report that has you at Michael Lank's house also has you picking up Nicole Albert going by 34 Fairview just before you went to Michael Lank's house. You aware of that?
We did not pick up Nicole Albert.
So you went by 34 Fairview, then diverted, and right after you went by 34 Fairview, went directly over to Michael Lank's house. What was the reason that you stopped by 34 Fairview first?
We didn't stop by. Maybe Carrie slowed down, but we did not stop by 34.
So you did a drive-by 34 Fairview for giggles? What?
No, that's how we get to Michael Lank's house.
If the report shows that you actually stopped at 34 Fairview and then went to Michael Lank's house, would we have another oh my gosh moment?
Nope, no oh my gosh moment. We did not pick up Nicole Albert.
Did anybody else go with you over to Michael Lank's house?
No, it was Carrie, myself, and her daughter.
Your Honor, maybe approach briefly.
Okay. Jurors, we're going to try and go right up to 1 o'clock, okay?
Ms. Mccabe, we've talked in some detail about your calls with John O'Keefe on the morning of January 29th. Do you recall that
Yes.
conversation? I want to focus your attention on or at 12:14 a.m., moving up to about 12:50 a.m. You have that time in mind?
Yes,
You've seen the Celebrite extraction from John O'Keefe's phone, which Mr. Lally showed you the other day, correct?
correct.
And you went through the series of phone calls that were made and that appear on his extraction report, correct?
Correct.
I just want to run through those time-wise very quickly just to orient you, if I can, and then I'll ask you some specific questions about it. There was a call at 12:14 a.m., correct?
Correct.
That was a call that you indicated was answered. You had a conversation with Mr. O'Keefe.
Correct.
There was a call at 12:18 and 47 seconds. That call also was answered by you. John O'Keefe made that phone call, correct?
Correct.
Then there's the 12:29 and 44 second call that you indicated was not answered.
Correct.
And that was a call to you, from you to him.
Correct.
There was a 12:41 call from you to John O'Keefe, correct? That was,
Correct.
there was a 12:41 and 54 second call from you to him. Is that right?
Correct.
There was a 12:43 and 19 second call from you to him.
Correct.
12:46 a.m. and 16 seconds from you to him.
Correct.
12:47 and 52 seconds from you to him.
Correct.
And 12:50 and 37 seconds from you to him, correct?
Correct.
You saw in his extraction report that all of those calls after 1218 were missed calls, correct?
In his report that you showed me?
Correct. In other words, the only two calls that were answered were the 1214 and 1218. Everything else was a missed call.
I believe so. I would have to refer to it again because I've seen so many reports.
And Ms. McCabe, according to the extraction reports that you've seen this morning, comparing yours to his, every single one of those calls was deleted off your phone. Correct? According to the reports.
According to that report, yes.
Let me ask you another question. Have you ever misplaced your phone?
Yes.
Just in life. Everybody does it, right?
Yes.
What's one of the first things you do if you're with your daughter or your husband or a friend and you're in your house and you misplace your phone? What do you do?
Oh, I'll ask them to call my phone.
Even over and over and over, right?
Correct.
Could be as many as 5, 6, 7 times.
Usually I hear it the first or second time.
You're looking for a buzz or a ring, isn't that right?
Correct.
And you might do that if you're searching for a missing phone, correct?
Correct.
With regard to the calls that were deleted from your phone, you were asked about this under oath at another proceeding, weren't you?
Correct.
And you claimed at another proceeding that you had an explanation for all these missed calls, starting at 1229, 1241, 1241, 1243, 1246, 1247, 1250. You have an explanation for that, right?
Can I see the report?
I'm asking you about your prior testimony.
And I'm asking,
About these calls,
yes, I'm asking, can I see it, please?
I'm asking you a different question. At this other proceeding, which you were under oath,
Yes.
right? You explained that these calls were what? These missed calls, incessant missed calls. What were they? You used a word. Matter of fact, it's 2 words.
I believe I used the word butt dials.
You claimed that every one of these calls was a butt dial. Is that right?
Yes.
So according to you, you literally butt dialed John O'Keefe's phone 6 times in the span of 19 minutes. Is that right?
I don't remember making any of those calls, so my assumption is I put my phone in my back pocket, and that was it.
When you dial someone by mistake, you hit a button, set your phone down, the phone has to be open. You'll agree with that, right?
Correct.
It can't be locked. Because it takes several iterations of movement to get a phone open. Face ID or password, right?
Correct.
So when you hit the button by mistake, walk away, that's a butt dial. You can call butt dials. What happens with the call?
I assume it goes to voicemail.
It's a good assumption, because that's exactly what it does, isn't it? You had a phone for a lot of years, right?
Yes.
It rings and rings and rings until it goes to voicemail.
Correct.
So in order to hang up that butt dial, you have to interact with that phone yet again, don't you?
Yes.
So if you had 6 butt dials, 7, I think it's 7 butt dials, you'd not only have to interact with the phone once to butt dial John, you'd then have to interact with it every single time to turn off that phone ringer so it doesn't go to voicemail, wouldn't you?
I suppose.
Which makes 14 interfaces with that phone over the course of 19 minutes. Is that right?
I mean, I guess I don't have it all right in front of me, but there were also text messages I was sending. So again, maybe I said, oh, shoot, I called them, and then I turned it off.
But your claim is you don't remember those incessant butt dials and those incessant hang-ups at all, correct?
I honestly don't.
So you would have had to forget that you interacted with, by the way, you'll agree that the phone extraction shows that John O'Keefe got no voicemails from you, right?
I didn't look, but
So that means you would have had to interact with that phone 14 times over the course of 19 minutes at the exact time frame that the Commonwealth suggests John O'Keefe lost his life.
Objection.
Sustained. You can ask that differently, and this will be your last question for today, please.
Yes, Your Honor. The period between 12:29 and 12:50, which is the exact period that you were, quote, butt dialing John multiple times, that's also the exact period that John O'Keefe was rendered incapacitated. Is that right?
Objection.
That's sustained. We'll start up again tomorrow, okay?
Thank you.
All right, folks, so I'm going to, want to stay there and walk out with it. Thank you.
thank you.
All right, so jurors, please do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any independent research or investigation into the case. If you happen to see, hear, or read anything about the case, please disregard it. Now, tomorrow will be a full day. The forecast is going to be very hot. You'll see this courtroom fluctuates. It could be really cold in here, could be really hot in here. So maybe bring us sweaters. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Jurors, closing and leaving your notebooks if you're all rise.